All right, good afternoon. I call to order the June 2nd, 2019 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Planning Commission. My name is Alyssa Lipke-Pierre. I'm Vice President, but will be acting as chair for today's meeting. I am joined by Commissioners Kronzer, Olson, Schrader, and Brown. At this time, be sure to turn off your pagers, cell phones, and other electronic devices. First, we're going to do approval of actions from the previous meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the actions from the meeting of May 13th, 2019. May I have a motion to approve those actions?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Those actions are approved. Next, we will approve the agenda for this meeting. We'll work from the agendas that are available on the table in the hall. I'll go through the agenda and sort out what items will be continued to a future meeting, which items will be withdrawn, and which items will be discussed, and which items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved as recommended. So, item number 1 is Penn Avenue Union, located at 2200 Golden Valley Road, 1911 through 1915, Penn Avenue North, 1906 through 1914, Queen Avenue North. The staff recommendation is approval on this item. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I'll move that to the consent agenda. Our next item would be the Midtown, it's item number 2, Midtown Corner, 2913 and 2941 26th Avenue South and 2912 28th Avenue South. This also is recommended for approval on consent. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to staff recommendation on this item? Seeing none, I'll move that also to the consent agenda. The third item is Malcolm Yards Phase 1, which is located at 445 Malcolm Avenue Southeast, 419 through 504 29th Avenue Southeast, and 501 30th Avenue Southeast. That is also recommended for approval. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in opposition to staff recommendation on that item? Seeing none, I will move that to the consent agenda. Item number 4 is the First Unitarian K-12 school located at 900 Mount Curve Avenue. There are 2 land use applications, and staff recommends approval on both. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to staff recommendation? One person. So we'll pull that from the consent agenda for discussion. The 5th item is located at 3443 Lindell Avenue South. There are 7 land use applications, and that will be discussed tonight. Item number 6 is 2812 Fremont Avenue South. That is recommended for approval. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to staff recommendation on item number 6? One person? Okay, we'll pull that to be discussed. Item number 7 is the Nokomis Mixed Use Development at 4715 Cedar Avenue South and 4712 Longfellow Avenue. There are 4 land use applications. We will be discussing that item tonight. Item number 8 is 311 2nd Avenue Southeast, and we will be discussing those 3 applications as well. And the last item on the agenda is item number 9. It's a zoning code text amendment for all wards, amending titles 20, chapters 520, 530, 548, 549, 550, and 551. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to that text amendment? Seeing none, I'll put that on consent. All right, so commissioners, I have items number 1, 2, 3, and 9 on consent. May I have a motion to approve the to approve the consent agenda for these items?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those items are approved on consent. And our agenda then also will be to discuss items 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Can you approve the agenda for those items as well?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So as chairperson of the committee of the whole, our consent agenda again is items 1, 2, 3, and 9. Sorry, I jumped the agenda here a little bit. Back up a second. I'm sorry. We're going to actually discuss real quick the committee of the whole consent agenda. As chairperson of the committee of the whole, I will now present the consent agenda from the May 16, 2019 committee of the whole meeting. We have 1 item, and that may I have a motion to find the land sale of 2120 Aldrich Avenue North to be consistent with Minneapolis plan.
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that is approved. All right, we have no action items today. We'll now open the public hearing. The process for the public hearing is as follows. First, we'll act on any items that are being continued. Then we'll act on the consent agenda items. There aren't any continued tonight, though. Once the items on consent agenda have been approved, the Planning Commission is done with those, and applicants may contact staff outside in the hallway or talk about them tomorrow about next steps. After that, we take the remaining agenda items in order. If it's your first public hearing, here's how this goes down. We allow the planning staff to present the application, and commissioners can ask questions of the staff. Then we hear from the applicant, and after that, we open the hearing to public comment. Come to the microphone, state your name and address for the public record. And make sure you sign up in the hallway. You don't have to do it now, although you can, but make sure before you leave, you do that. All right, please keep your comments specific to the applications before us today. And after public comments are complete, I'll close the public hearings and we will deliberate and act on the applications. So I will now open the public hearing on the consent agenda items one last time. Is there anybody here for items number 1, 2, 3, and 9? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on that. May I have a motion to approve staff recommendation and findings for those items? Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Nay? Any abstentions? All right, those items are approved as recommended by staff, and thank you for coming down for those items. Now we'll go to our first item for discussion, which is item number 4, the First Unitarian K-12 School at 900 Mount Curve Avenue. We have 2 applications for this item.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Shanna Sether, I'm presenting on behalf of Lindsay Silas. The subject property for item number 4 is located at 900 Mount Curve Avenue. It's the First Unitarian K-12 school. It's a conditional use permit to allow for a new K-12 school in the R2 district, and a variance to reduce the minimum off-street parking from 4 spaces to 0. Here's an existing site plan showing the existing 3-story structure. It's about 30,000 square feet in area. There is no off-street parking currently provided for the existing structure. Staff would consider the building to have non-conforming rights for the existing use. It's the change in use that requires the additional 4 spaces in parking. The building is used by the First Unitarian Society. The building has an education wing with 7 classrooms that were previously used for a child care facility. But as previously noted, the change in use to a K-12 school where 9th and 10th graders will be present at site. The enrollment is projected at 95 students. That's why the increase of off-street parking of 4 spaces beyond what was there previously. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit and variance to reduce the off-street parking. In this case, there are no changes as part of the proposed project. It's always been used as kind of an educational component within the existing structure. Any sort of additional requirements through construction code services will be required. Therefore, staff does not feel as though the additional students or classrooms would be detrimental to the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. As far as traffic goes, adequate measures have been taken to reduce or minimize traffic congestion of public streets. Most of the students enrolled will take the city bus, according to the applicant. The Route 6 Metro Transit is only one block away, and there will be vehicle drop-off also for parents that are dropping off. The school is also working on establishing a parking agreement with a nearby parking garage for both staff and student parking. Staff notes land use policies and urban design policies that are consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that the use complies with all other requirements in the R2 district. So as previously noted, it's a new K-12 charter school specifically for 9th and 10th graders. Staff finds that practical difficulties exist in reducing the off-street parking requirement from 4 to 0 that are unique to the property because there are no good options for providing off-street parking on the subject property, and 4 spaces could be easily provided through an alternative means as I've just described. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit with a condition of approval that the conditional use permit be recorded with the Hennepin County, and a variance be approved 7 spaces to 0 spaces, and that the applicant, with the condition of approval, that the applicant work with Public Works to explore opportunities for designated drop-off spaces on Groveland Terrace. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks very much.
Would the applicant like to come up and speak, please? State your name and address to the record, please.
Hello, my name is Timothy Rail, and I am the representative for the First Unitarian Society at 900 Mount Curve. The building was built in Minneapolis in 1949. We've been there for 70 years. In the last 70 years, we have always had either a daycare or a school or some sort of other thing happening in the building. It's never been full church. Child garden daycare was there for about 50 years before there were ever these sorts of rules needed. They left in 2014, and actually we did have a K through 12 school in there, and we didn't know we needed a permit. Anyway, so now a new school is moving in, and we are asking for this conditional use permit. In the whole time that we've had these various institutions there over the last 70 years, we've not had any issues as far as complaints with educational things happening on the site. It's the same amount of space will be used that we had the daycare in. There's going to be 7 classrooms. There's a parking or a drop-off cutout that exists that's been there for decades and is still there. And so we really would appreciate the ability to keep our building use the same as it has been basically for the last 70 years, which is to be an educational institution for the students and folks of Minneapolis and surrounding areas. Any questions?
Commissioner Kronzer.
Could you speak more to the parking agreement you're working on?
In the last 70 years, there used to be a surface lot across the street there. It is now City of Minneapolis, some sort of agreement with the Walker and that whole situation there. And the charter school is working with them, trying to come up with a situation that they can could get a few spots at a reasonable price. But really, we're talking about 4 cars here to make things legit. And these are 10th grade kids. I guess the thought is that all the 10th graders can drive at the beginning of school, which they really can't. And so, yeah, it's the 4 spots that we're talking about. And the Walker lot is the street, or the lot that we're talking about. Anything else?
All right, I see no other questions. Thank you. I'll now open the hearing. If anybody else would like to come to the microphone and speak, state your name and address to the record.
My name is John Kitchener. I live at 808 Mount Curve, which is 2 doors down from the church. I just received the letter. This is the first I've actually heard of the school going in there. The Unitarian Church has been a great neighbor. I have no issue with that. My main concern is about the parking and the traffic. Mount Curve is a one-way, very narrow street, at least on where I live. And I know that there's another street below, Oak Grove, I think it is, that goes to the other entrance of the church. So my main concern is how this traffic to the school will affect Mount Curve. I'm not as much concerned about the traffic on Oak Grove, which is a little busier street. But if there's a lot of traffic coming on Mount Curve, it's already very difficult to find parking in that area. It's permit parking only, and we have only 1 garage at our place, and it's always difficult to find street parking. So that's my main concern is about where the cars are going to go and how the traffic is going to impact us where we live. And I know I've talked to my neighbors; they have the same concern. So I'm sort of representing all of us who live along that little stretch of Mount Curve next to the church.
Are there any questions for the speaker? I have a question. Are you concerned about the parking during school hours or in the evenings, or is there just in general? Or
I mean, it would be not only in general, but also people, if they're going to use Mount Curve to drop off their kids, that's going to increase the amount of traffic going by where we live, and it's already very congested and very narrow street. So my question really is, what plan is there for getting those kids to school? Not all of them are going to take the bus. I'm sure some parents will drop them off, and there may be some kids who want to drive when they get to that age. So that's really my concern.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on this issue, on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, we have 2 applications before us. I have a motion to start discussion on this item. Commissioner Kronzer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the one stated condition.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable use of an existing building that's essentially had the same use for decades.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Brown.
I'll just address the Testfires comment. I do think in general it's fair for schools and residential areas to look at a drop-off plan, since there often are many vehicles arriving at once, whether it's reserving a certain amount of space in front of the building, signing it appropriately. I'm not quite comfortable placing a condition on this just yet without knowing all the facts, but I would suggest to the applicant that's something worth looking at.
Thank you. Any further comments? And clerk, would you please call roll?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
That motion passes. Does somebody like to discuss the variance application?
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance with the one stated condition.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
And that variance passes. Thank you for coming down. Our next item for discussion is 3443 Lindale Avenue South.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Crandall, Senior City Planner, CPUD Land Use. The project before you is located in the Lindale neighborhood at 3443 Lindale Avenue South. It's a site currently occupied by a single-family home and currently zoned for the R2B Residence District. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property to R5 in order to construct a new residential building with 19 dwelling units. You can see here on the zoning map some of the context. The site is located close to the corner, adjacent to a small commercial building, and then it's a mix of R5, R2B, and commercial zoning in the general area. This is a map that shows some of the land use features on the comprehensive plan's future land use map. I just wanted to provide some context for how staff analyzed the project. So the site is marked in red on this map. You can see that it's located on a community corridor. Lindale Avenue, Bryant Avenue, which is immediately to the west, is also a community corridor. There is a transit route on that street that qualifies as a high-frequency transit route, which reduces the parking requirements for multiple family projects within close proximity to that bus line. And then you'll see the Lynn Lake Activity Center about 4 blocks to the north, and then a couple of neighborhood commercial nodes immediately to the south. On the survey, you can see the existing single-family home. There's an additional single-family home immediately to the north, and then that one-story commercial building immediately to the south. So again, it's a 4-story, 19-unit building. All of the units are efficiency units, and this is a rendering showing the view of the structure from the front on Lyndale Avenue. And then this is a view of the site with the new proposed structure, and then some photographs of the existing conditions. So the applicant is requesting yard variances. For the front yard, the applicant's requesting a variance to reduce the minimum established front yard setback. That requirement is established by the residents immediately to the north of the project at 26 feet, requesting to reduce that to 15 feet. 15 is the minimum in the R5 residence district. And then requesting a variance to the interior side yards on the north and south. So we're reducing the north side yard setback from 11 to 7 feet, and reducing the interior yard setback along the south property line from 11 to 5 adjacent to that commercial building, and then reducing the rear yard setback from 11 to 7. The applicant is also requesting an FAR variance to increase the maximum FAR from 2 to 2.38. And then, of course, the site plan review application. This is the first floor plan that shows how the ground floor is laid out. So there's a principal entrance to the residences along Lyndale, and a principal entrance at the rear. The applicant is proposing to provide enclosed bike storage on site, which is accessed via a side door along the north building wall. And then the applicant is not proposing to provide any vehicle parking on site. The project does not have a minimum vehicle parking requirement due to its location in close proximity to high-frequency transit. And then this is a landscape plan showing a concrete patio in the front yard. We've analyzed that patio as a part of the front yard variance, as it does exceed the maximum size for a patio. Staff felt that in a community corridor context that it was not inappropriate for that location, although we have asked that the applicant modify the fence design to comply with zoning regulations for fence height. Shadow study showing the shadowing impacts of the project. So as you can imagine, going from a single-family home to a 4-story apartment building, there will be additional shadowing impacts, especially to properties to the north. Those are most pronounced during winter months, and then during the shoulder seasons and summer are primarily limited to the property immediately to the north. And then elevations that show the exterior material palette, which includes a wood grain metal panel and a vertical metal panel. Staff has suggested a condition of approval that the applicant implement a masonry product at the base of the structure to protect against weathering and other effects that might happen due to adjacent land use. And that is kind of a summary of the project. I can take any questions, otherwise I can let the applicant address some more specifics.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? Commissioner Pronzer.
Peter, do you happen to know the 3-story buildings that are kind of kitty corner from here? Do you happen to know the height of those in feet?
I don't know the exact height, no.
Okay, thanks.
Peter, I had some questions. Do you happen to know how wide the alley is?
Typically, alleys in Minneapolis tend to be like 12 to 15 feet. So
We
they're
don't know what
not,
this one is for sure.
I don't know the exact dimensions,
No,
no.
it's the applicant. And then, do you know how close the alley is to that attached trash enclosure? Because it looks really close.
The trash enclosure is right up against the rear property line. So the applicants designed it such that there wouldn't be any outswinging doors or any other equipment that interferes with the public right-of-way. So it's actually accessed from the north and then with sliding doors from the alley.
Oh, Commissioner Coleman.
Can you tell me what the unit sizes are, the range?
All of them are about the same size, and I believe they are around 500 square feet, although I'd ask the applicant to clarify that.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Ellison.
Yes, would they need this variance if we were in the 2040 plan or
Which variants are you referring to?
any of them?
That's difficult to say. The 2040 plan is not yet in effect, but it is guiding the site currently for the Corridor 4 district, which has a maximum height limit of 4 stories. There's a lot of details to be worked out in terms of what setback requirements would be and lot coverage and things like that. So I can't really say what the applications would be required.
Any other questions for staff? Right. Thank you, Peter. I'd now like the applicant to come up. Please give your name and address for the record.
The alley is 12 feet wide.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Alex Brogel, South Face Creative Builders, 4104 San Vitero Lane, Victoria, Minnesota, 55318. I want to thank you for considering our proposal for a redevelopment project for 3443 Lindale Avenue South. We feel the proposal is a great fit for this location due to the urban nature of the current property, it being contiguous to a densely zoned corner, and it being located on a main arterial roadway of the city of Minneapolis. Thank you. Questions?
Commissioner Coleman.
And if you could just answer the question that I asked staff earlier, which is what is the approximate size of the units?
Sure. So 2 different sizes, about 425 square feet, 1 bedroom, and then about 525 square feet, a 1 bedroom.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? The staff had mentioned a suggestion to change the lower portion of your building material to a different material. Can you address whether or not you intend to do that?
Sure. Yep, we intend to do that.
Do you know what material you plan to use, masonry or?
Yes. Yeah, we're planning on doing basically like 5 feet of masonry along the entire bottom of the building. So probably like thin stone veneer of masonry stone or brick.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else who'd like to speak on this item, please come to the microphone to state your name and address for the record. Anybody who wants to. You just come on up. Just like the Price is Right. Only you all got called.
Hi, my name is Ralph T. Goodwin III. I live at 3423 Lindale Avenue South. And I want to speak to both the land use changes and the variance requests. I sent a letter to the commission, so hopefully you've seen it since I wrote that letter. My understanding of some of this has evolved. I understand now that, for example, the comprehensive plan that's in play is the Minneapolis plan for sustainable growth, and as I understand it, the 2040 plan has nothing to do with decisions that are made today. First, I am supportive of higher housing density and potentially supportive of this land use redesignation to R5. However, I have significant concerns about the reasoning that the city planner has used in leading to his recommendation. I don't think he actually explicitly said before you that he has recommended, these land use, approving these land use changes and the variances. Nevertheless, first, the dwelling units per acre for this property would be 151. He cites that typical in this area is 40 to 90. According to the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, for a community corridor, 20 to 50 dwelling units per acre is typical. In responding to the notion of whether or not there's been a change in character or trend of developments in the general area of the property in question, Mr. Crandall observes that that there have been several developments, that is to say, multifamily mixed-use projects along the Lindale Community Corridor. And he notes that these are north of this project. Well, in fact, they are north of Lake. They're north of 31st Street. And Lindale, north of 31st Street, is not a community corridor, but it's a commercial corridor. And on commercial corridors, there are higher dwelling unit per acre guidances. So I think this is a non-representative example that was cited. Secondly, in arguing for this land use change, the city planner cites 1.9.6 of the land use policy, which says to promote more intense residential development along community corridors near intersections with neighborhood commercial nodes or other locations where it is compatible with existing character. And I think that's arguably correct. The commercial node is about a block away. However, he ignores 1.9.5, which says encourage the development of low to medium density housing on community corridors to serve as transitions to surrounding low density areas. And I don't think we can be selective about which of these parts of the land use policy we want to cite. Okay. Those are my thoughts on the land use. Higher density is okay, but maybe this is excessive. And with respect to the variances, as I understand it, this body has to reach 3 findings to approve a variance. And you have to reach this finding on each of these. And the first one talks about practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. Well, I would argue that every 1/8 acre site in Minneapolis would have the problems that this project has trying to put this building on 1/8 of an acre. So it's not unique to this property. The second is the unique circumstances are not created by persons presently having an interest in the property. Well, I think these were explicitly created by the developer wanting to put a 19-unit building on 1/8 of an acre property. And then the third part of this first criteria is that, and these are not based on economic considerations alone. Well, last Monday night at the Lindale Neighborhood Association, which was attended by about 40 people, I asked Alex Brogel if the variance requests were largely driven by economic considerations of the project, and he said yes, in front of 40 people. So I think just based on that alone, each of these variances, irrespective of what's being asked, have to be denied. The second finding is that the property owner or authorized applicant proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner that will be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. Well, I think 151 dwelling units per acre is not in keeping with the intent or spirit of the comprehensive plan. So again, I don't think this one should be allowed. Any of these variances should be allowed. And then the third one says the proposed variance will not alter the essential character of the locality or be injurious to the use or enjoyment of the property in the vicinity. I think the only people that can speak to that, whether it's injurious to the use or enjoyment of property in the vicinity are the property owners and residents. And, the people that are to the north of this building are going to be strongly impacted by having, and I'm sure they'll speak to it later in this meeting, by this, this tall building being next to them. I really don't want to speak to each of the variances, but I will speak to the floor area ratio increase request from 2.0 to 2.38. The city planner notes that if enclosed parking is provided, then a variance from 2.0 to 2.38 is allowed. This developer is proposing no parking, and I see no reason, therefore, that he should be the beneficiary of an economically beneficial increase in the FAR. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Just come on up if you do, and state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Meegan. I live in Lindale on 3228 Harriet Avenue South. I also own property at 31st and Lindale, where I've had a business there for 20 years. Number one, I would just like to speak to the precedent that this project sets. As was said, every single house in a residential non-commercial corridor along Lindale would then become fair game for any developer who says, I can put down $300,000 and then the cost of tearing this property down and build these ad infinitum as long as they're within 2 blocks of Bryant Avenue. And the block where this project is sited has a commercial property on the north and a commercial property on the south, and everywhere in between is residential. He said at the meeting that he couldn't make any changes to this plan if there was to be negotiation between the neighborhood, the residents nearby, without, it would affect his profit. No changes, he said, would be allowed. We have dealt with other developers putting large projects in Lindale who have made concessions regarding height in a way trying to mitigate the effects that putting up a legitimate project would create. I would ask that everybody who's on a planning committee like this not be allowed to vote unless they stood in front of a site like this and saw it and said, if this was going to happen next to my property, how would I feel? How would I respond? Would this seem right to me? To make these kind of judgments when you see pictures of a building without stepping back and seeing this is the property to the north and this is the property to the south is not an informed decision. To make those kind of judgments that will affect other people's lives, it just doesn't seem right to me. Same thing for city council. You're going to do it. I would like to ask Andrea Jenkins, if this happened next to your house, how would you respond to it? Would it seem right in the middle of a block like this? There are many more appropriate sites where you could take empty lots that have sat vacant. Where I am at Lynn Lake, there are properties that have been sitting fallow for 20 to 25 years with no activity whatsoever, where these kind of projects would seem eminently suited to be put in. There are also buildings where it doesn't make sense to tear them down, but right now single-family homes are the most sought-after properties in the real estate market at entry level. That's what this property is, and it's fair game at entry level to tear it down instead. So we would take good housing stock and rip it down. Nothing has been said that this is a blighted house. In fact, it has been recently remodeled, and now it's time to tear it down. Last but not least, to do an end run, to pull a project like this and bring it to city planning staff and ask them for their recommendations on variances before they've even spoke to adjacent property owners and given a neighborhood a chance to ask questions, that seems very inappropriate. This is a process that has circumvented going through a community, and most of the people who maybe thought that 2040 plan meant that triplexes were the maximum development that would occur, but now they're seeing that this isn't the case. Now it's 19 units that can go up next to any house that there is, and 4 stories of shadow next to all kinds of residential. I understand the goals of density. I just think developers should find better locations that make sense to demolish in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come on up? Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Bartel Jones, and my husband Dennis Jones and I own the duplex, and we occupy the duplex also.
Can we get your address? I'm sorry.
Yeah. 3444 Garfield.
Thank you.
We're directly across the alley from this property. I'm here today to talk about density of our current neighborhood, and because we've got such a wide variety of types of housing. So I used the city map. I think, can you see that on the screen? Oh, okay. It's a 350-foot radius. So I did a lot of research and I came up with numbers. So I want to go through those with you. We have one church, one office building that houses 3 different spaces. We have 3 businesses. We have 14 duplexes. And the duplexes, when counting the number of rental units, I decided to do the benefit of the doubt, and I figured 14 rental, and where they were all owner occupied. I'm nervous. We also have 4 fourplexes. We have 6 apartment buildings. The apartment buildings hold 78 rental units, and we have 51 single family. So when you total up the rental right now, we have 96 rental units. That's 82 one-bedroom, 13 two-bedroom, and 1 three-bedroom. So now we want to add 19 more rental units to that to drive it up to 115. And our neighborhood cannot withstand that big of an increase. We're already densely populated. Alex had mentioned in a meeting that he thinks all the millennials will be renting in there. And we asked about cars and parking. Well, they all use Uber and they all use the transit system. Yes, they use it, but they also have cars. And there's no parking at all with this. The other thing I want to mention, I did a previous email that I stated some things that are a little different than this. I don't think 2 dumpsters is enough for that many units. We live next to a unit right now that has 11 units and 2 dumpsters. It's consistently overflowing. So I see issues there. And I don't feel that neighbors should have to police that apartment building and call the owner, who is not living on the property, and he also has no intention of having a caretaker on the premises. So those are my objections to all of it.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Anyone else?
I have copies of this if you want them.
Actually, can you submit a copy to the clerk for the record?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi,
Can I get your name and address for the record?
I'm Rinoa Swanson, and I live on 34th Avenue. Wait, no, 34th Street, and I live on Lindale, and our house is right next to the place that wants to be built. Yeah. It could affect us in a lot of ways. We had a friend that had their basement wall being caved in. That could happen to us. Or we usually sit on the porch and get a lot of sun, but with that we would have like barely any sun. And there might be lead in the paint. So like if they tear down the house, then it could like go to our place and like affect us. Like in Flint, Michigan, there was lots of lead in their water, and it killed and hurt a lot of people. Usually the owners would let us play in their yard, and without the yard, then we would have barely any space. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Going once. Oh, here we go. Come on up.
My name is Kerri Swanson, and I am the mother to Rinoa and live at 3439 Lindale Avenue South. My husband and I purchased our home at 3439 Lindale Avenue South on June 25th, 1999 from an estate. Our home had a significant amount of deferred maintenance and necessary updating that we've addressed over the years. With each improvement, we could feel our home stand a little taller and a little more proud. It has been a labor of love. Most of our work has been on the interior of our home and we've just started to focus our efforts on the exterior. Me, Eric, and our 4 children live at the home directly north of 3443 Lindale Avenue South, the property Alex Brogel recently purchased with the intent to redevelop. As you can imagine, I have many concerns about this project and the excessive number of variances being requested, and rezoning, I should say, include. Most variances South Face Creative Builders is requesting will have a negative effect on the use and enjoyment of our property. If the height or rezoning and the east-west variances are approved, the 4-story apartment building will nearly cover the entire lot and shadow our home and yard for much of the year, leaving us with no direct sunlight from approximately July 15th to June 1st. Additionally, having this building occupy all but 7 feet in the back and 15 in the front will drastically obstruct our view and will eliminate any and all privacy. This will become very problematic when we decide to sell in the future, as most buyers find apartment buildings to be a deal breaker, essentially stripping away the equity that we have been building over the last 20 years. Had I not called Alex, I, along with my neighbors, would not have known about the project until receiving a flyer from Lindale Neighborhood Association alerting neighbors of a meeting that was to be held last Monday, May 28th. That meeting would have been after the Planning Commission public hearing that was postponed last month because of notification issues. Since the required letter that is to be mailed 15 days prior to the public hearing was never sent, we would not have had the opportunity to present to you today, because the initial public hearing was scheduled for May 13th, would have preceded Alex's proposal to the Lindale neighborhood meeting last Tuesday. It was the hard work of the property owners on the 3400 block of Lindale and Garfield that got the public hearing postponed and rescheduled to today. I have learned a significant amount over the past several weeks, and a couple of things stand out to me. First, South Face Creative Builders and Peter Crandall circumvented existing protocol when Alex decided not to work in partnership with the neighborhood, and Peter approved all the variances and rezoning rezoning, and according to Alex, advised him on what the neighborhood would feel was acceptable. Secondly, the apartment rendering that is dated December 2017, the apartment rendering is dated December 2017, so Peter's response of unique circumstances with a lot at 3443 Lindale is inaccurate. What is unique is that Alex has an apartment that he wants to build on a lot that's too small, and, as I already stated before, bypassed existing protocol of the developer engaging and working with the neighborhood first, and Peter Crandall approving plans without community input. Finally, it is prohibited by Minnesota law to rezone for the sole purpose of profit, and that's exactly what is happening. And Alex clearly stated that at the Lindale neighborhood meeting last Tuesday when he answered that the variances he was seeking were to maximize the return on investment. With all this, it is difficult for me not to think that Alex, along with Peter Crandall's help, has attempted this before and has failed. This proposed development fits the classic definition of spot zoning to me, the process of singling out a small parcel of land for a use classification totally different from the surrounding area and for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of the owners. Eric and I met privately with Alex, and he made it clear to us that he wanted to work with us and the neighborhood. He wanted to be a good neighbor. He affirmed that again at our neighborhood meeting last Tuesday. However, shortly after making that claim, he firmly stated that he will not make any modifications to his plan and that he will wait for the 2040 plan to be implemented if he doesn't get approval. My family has a lot to lose should this project be allowed to move forward and get approved. Our use and enjoyment will be negatively affected by eliminating our rear and front yard sightline, loss of visible neighborhood scape, diminished sense of security with inability to see down our alley. We will also lose any future ability to have green space or gardens due to the lack of sun. We lose privacy since tenants will have full view of our home and our backyard. Our taxes will increase, possibly making it difficult for us to continue to live in our home. And while our taxes increase, our home value goes down because buyers are not interested in purchasing a home next to an apartment building. As a licensed realtor for 13 years, I have yet to sell a home to a buyer that sits next to an apartment building. It's too risky for most buyers, so they will continue their search, even in a tight market, for another home. If you do a simple Google search on how apartments affect the resale value of a home, you will find plenty of responses from realtors stating that buyers steer away from these homes for fear of increased crime, lack of privacy, noise, and etc. There needs to be a system in place that residents can rely on. One that is timeless and enduring, regardless of who is senior city planner or who is on the planning commission. We all know that initiatives and urban plans change with time, but how citizens are engaged needs to remain constant, something that we know that is predictable and something that we can rely on. Minneapolis residents should have the confidence that developers will partner with us to create a plan that is equitable for all prior to submitting it to the city planner for approval. We also need confidence that the city planner will redirect developers back to the neighborhood when and if the developer seeks city approval first. Bypassing protocol, norms, and customs is what has so many progressives upset with Washington, and this is exactly what has happened here. There needs to be a system in place. That's a repeat. Finally, on a personal note, I don't know how many people in this room have been directly impacted, or affected, I should say, by adoption, but that's very much part of our family story. As I've stated, Eric and I have 4 children who were adopted. Our children, like many adoptees, experience grief and loss in a deeper, more raw, and permanent life-changing way because their beginning started with loss. This is the only home our children have ever known and have an attachment to, so simply putting a for sale sign in our yard or accepting an attractive offer from a developer to move is not easily done for us. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Can I get a show of hands of how many other people want to speak, just so I can? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stenzel, and my husband, my 4 kids, and I live at 3411 Garfield Avenue. And much of what I'm saying is probably just a recap of what you've heard from other people, but it kind of shows maybe what the majority are feeling right now. This developer is pushing the limits of what the small 45 by 122 lot can accommodate. Alex wants to change 3443 from a 1,500 square foot single family home, typical of our neighborhood, to a 13,000 square feet apartment building that, as you have seen, will essentially cover the entire lot and block much of the light to the neighbors to the north and to the east. It is clear when you walk our neighborhood that this lot is not suitable for this large building. In fact, Alex and Peter Crandall acknowledge this lot will not accommodate the proposed building by the number of variances they are seeking. On top of the request to change the zoning, Alex is requesting to increase the allowed square footage even further by requesting that the maximum floor area ratio go above what is typical for an R5. The report says the site's size and configuration present a practical difficulty in complying with the maximum FAR limits. Also, he is requesting to reduce the setbacks on all four sides over what is typical for an R5. The report again says practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of the circumstances unique to the property. All of these practical difficulties indicate to me that the density he desires is unreasonable and should not be permitted, given the size of the lot and the character of our neighborhood. Alex explained at our neighborhood meeting that he is unwilling to compromise with the neighborhood because it will not work for him financially. He has said that in order for him to make the kind of money developers are making with buildings like the murals, he cannot and will not compromise. Those types of buildings are on much larger lots in denser areas, unlike our neighborhood. Alex chose to take a risk when buying this single-family home, hoping that the variances would pass. It is not the responsibility of this committee, the neighborhood, or the city to approve the variances and put the economic needs of one developer over the needs of the community. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any questions. So next speaker.
Hi. My name's Ken Potts. I'm the owner of a 12-unit building on 3501 Lindale. And I guess there's been a lot of really good things pointed out, but I'm going to focus on one item, and that would be my experience with parking in this neighborhood. And just quickly, we ended up eventually getting an extra piece of land to house 8 additional cars to keep as many cars off the street as possible. So we now comply with 1 car per unit. So we have, we went through the extra effort to get 12 off-street parking spots. And as I have dealt with this over the years, surprisingly, there's the millennials and the new tenants seem to have more cars than they did 15 years ago. There's very few that have less than 2 cars that move into these units. So I guess my point is to focus at some point in your decision just on the parking aspect, because in the winter months when the roads are narrow, plowing is going on, it's already very, very tight. In the summer months, it tends to work its way out as it stands with the densities that have been mentioned with our area. So just really focusing on that parking aspect, and who's going to pay that price is all the folks that have spoken here today. So that's, any other questions from an apartment owner?
See none. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I thought there were 3 more hands. Just come on up and state your name and address and new information, please.
Good evening. I am Erik Swanson. I live at 3439 Lindale. To answer your question earlier about the 3-story apartment buildings and their height, those 3-story apartment buildings are all have garden level units on them. So they have a half a story below grade, and then they have 2 stories above grade, 2.5 stories above grade, which would put the building at approximately 22 to 24 feet per 22 to 24 feet high off the ground. So he's asking for 14 more feet beyond what the other buildings in the neighborhood are. I just wanted to say there were one thing that hasn't been addressed, nobody's spoken to tonight, is I am really concerned about water and water intrusion. He has, the proposal has essentially, there's about 12% of the lot is permeable for moisture. And we have traditionally every winter we are out, the plows go through and we have ruts in our sidewalk or in our alley because the water get in there, freezes, and it's we can't get the water away from our house. Every year my garage floods, and I'm really concerned about my basement flooding. We just invested, $70,000 into refinishing our basement, and we've never had any water intrusion, and I'm assuming that with no practical way to divert the water off the property and into the sewers, that we're going to have issues with our water. So anyway, variances. Like my wife said, the setbacks on all four sides are unnecessary. This man has taken a plan that he had drawn up 2 years ago and is trying to find a spot in Minneapolis to put this plan. And there's nothing unique about this lot. There's nothing different about his lot than there is about mine, other than the organisms that live on it, and the house that's built on it. And they would certainly, by granting the variances, would certainly have an effect on our ability to enjoy what we do. We couldn't sit on our front porch and see the people come down the street. One of the things that 20 years ago, we couldn't sit on our front porch. Now we sit on our front porch and all the time we are like, oh my God, I'm so glad that there are people out here that come down our street every day, that go to Lynn Lake that's been revitalized, and it's so nice to get out and talk to people. But now with an apartment building and a fence that we can't see beyond, we won't be able to sit out there and communicate and have a good time with our neighbors as they walk by in the evening. The setback for the alleyway, he has 7 feet, the setback of 7 feet, which is approximately as wide as a car. And he believes that people won't park and block the alley when he has this hardened surface in the back. He stated that, maybe people could park back there. I can't remember exactly, but I apologize. So anyway, there are none of the variances seem to me to be in the interest of any of the neighbors, and I would not. I disagree with all of them. I apologize.
Well, thank you. I don't see any questions. So is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Come on up to the mic. Okay, so two left. I'm sorry. Two left. Oh, three. 1, 2, 3, is that? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Copeland. I'll be very brief. I'm not a real eloquent public speaker, but I live at 3438 Garfield Avenue South, so I'm directly across the alley from the Swansons, and so directly kitty corner across the alley from the proposed development. And I just, most of my neighbors have, mentioned most of the things, and I agree with everything that they have said, so I want to come out in public in opposition of the project. And I think the one thing that maybe nobody's mentioned so far is that there's no designated load in and load out for when people move in and move out of the building. And if there's 19 units and he said at the meeting he's hoping this will be a real low turnover thing, but you never know. With 19 units, there's going to be a lot of people moving in and moving out, and they're probably going to come and park in the alley and block the alley, and I can see problems with that. Besides that, yeah, we've lived in our house since 2001. My wife and I, we have 2 kids, one of them living at home now, and we've enjoyed the neighborhood, and I just kind of don't see this as being a positive addition. I guess I have nothing else.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next speaker, just come on up. And then after him, you.
Well, I wasn't planning on, my name is Brad Kettersmith. I'm at 3400 Garfield. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I just wanted to address one of the questions that one of you had. What were the heights of the neighboring buildings around the corner where this is being built? And I will tell you that the kitty clinic is just south of that proposed development. That's 1 story. Across the street south of that is a 2.5-story apartment building. Across the street on Lindale, there's an auto body shop and Vaux's restaurant, both 1 story. Kitty corner from the kitty clinic and the development is a house, basically 1.5 story. So basically, Mr. Meegan spoke earlier about the commercial development is mostly north of 31st Street, going north on Lindale. That's where the buildings generally are a little taller. South of there, this is the character of the whole neighborhood. We're looking at houses are generally 1.5 to 2 story. Even all the apartment buildings on our block in the neighborhood, they tend to be 2.5 story, where half the story is at ground level and then 2 stories above it. So this proposal is a 4-story dorm-like condo unit that's going to tower above everything in our neighborhood. And as you can look at the drawing on the plans, there's no yard. I walked around that yard this last week. There's trees, and that's what's beautiful about Minneapolis. We're a green city. It's full of trees. They're going to knock down every single tree on that lot, and they say they're going to have 1 tree planted. I find that's ridiculous. The other thing, talking about the load off and drop off, there's no plan for that. I mean, you look in the front, if you look at the plan, that whole building takes up the whole lot. On the front, they're having a little space for a patio. There's no drop off. So if you're going to load and unload on the front, they're going to have to park somewhere on Lindale. Well, years ago, Lindale put in a nice boulevard to calm the neighborhood and the traffic, and it'd be more pedestrian friendly. Now you've got this apartment building in there. There's no place to drop off and load any of these apartment buildings. And if you go in the alley, that pad's not going to be big enough for a truck, so you're going to block the alley. So I'm just totally opposed to it. I think it's ridiculous. It's spot zoning, and it doesn't even fit in with the 2040 plan. So I can't see how, in good conscience, that City Hall, city planners can't listen to the constituents. I think we've been in this neighborhood since 1994. I think our voices should be heard over 1 developer. Thank you. Any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Yep.
Last speaker, come to the mic and give your name and address to the record, please. After this, we normally don't allow twice testifying, but you can ask a question if you have a brief question.
Hi, my name is Jérôme Chateau. I live at 3304 DuPont, and I'm originally from Paris. I have a business here. I've been here for more than 30 years. And I also write for a French daily about Minnesota life and politics, including this process, for example, which I commend you for, because that's really civilized and civil. So I think this city has a great way of interacting with its residents. And that's also why 2 or 3 years ago I came here in front of this commission to testify in favor of the Moxie Hotel, which is a few blocks from my house. And the reason for that is because coming from Europe and moving to an American city, it's very disconcerting to see this huge contrast between the urban corridors, the more urban landscapes such as downtown or Lake Street, parts of Lindale, and the residential neighborhoods. From a European perspective, there seems to be lots of greediness, empty lots, very poor use of the land. And the Moxie Hotel, to me, was a no-brainer because it brings density and life and business to what I think is a dead area. When came the 2040 plan, as you can tell, I'm definitely in favor of more density. But I saw weaknesses in this plan. I thought in many ways it has imbalances between the way the energy for density was geared. And I thought there was not enough pressure on the urban corridors or the downtown. And by the way, the parking lots are still left idle. You guys have no policy to deal with the downtown parking lots so far. Hopefully one day you will, but you don't right now. So what I mean by that is that on Lake Street, for instance, the minimum stories is still 2 stories in the 2040 plan. And yet in the residential neighborhoods, which I really cherish, and I think it's the gem of American cities in many ways to have that combination of both green space, different types of housing, and a quality of living, you have instilled an incredible pressure for density that I think is unjustified and too much for most neighborhoods. And I came again in front of the city council to say what I'm just telling you right now, this past January. And guess what? Just less than 6 months after this is the perfect illustration of the worst scenario I could envision from the 2040 plan. And I'm going to connect it to another example on Lake Street, where you're going to review where you're going to review a project next week of a 3-story business building that is going to be built, although the original plan was a 5-story, 44-unit building. And now we're looking at a 4-story building in a very residential neighborhood, sidewalk to alley, not a single green space. I realize Lindale is also an urban corridor, but we are talking about a very residential part of Lindale. And this contrast between these 2 stories, one creating shade, absence of privacy on a family with 2 adopted children, and on the other hand, on Lake Street, just a few blocks away, it's Lake and Grand, just a 3-story building, beautiful building. I'm sure he's a nice owner, but we're going to be stuck with a 3-story building for 20, 30 years, even though you want density. I think there's a problem there, and I think that illustrates the weaknesses of this 2040 plan, which is not exactly falling under the guidelines today, but still it's in the mind of everyone. And that's where your decision today is very important, because it's not just for story variance, this and parking and all that. Yes, there are some very important personal stories of a family and people living in this area. It's also contrasted with what is not happening elsewhere. So you are creating a precedent here. This is a very political decision that you are making today on the type of development you want for this city. And I urge you to rise to the occasion and to make the right decision and to downscale this project, to push the pause button. This 2040 plan is not fleshed out. The zoning has to be negotiated. The guidelines have to be written. There's lots of things that you need to take into account, such as the right of privacy, the shade, the loss of green spaces at a time when we talk about the heat island index. All those things are important. So the question, do you really want a building like this everywhere? Is that the new template? We're going to have this 4-story building, one next to each other with 1 yard between each? Is that the new model for this city? That would be very disappointing, and frankly, I don't think that's what you have in mind. And this is what this vote is about. If you want this type of urban landscape, or if you're willing to give it a little bit of time and look through the details of what is needed when it comes to density in this city. Smart density, not density at all cost. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. All right. One last call. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this item before I close the public hearing? All right, do you have your question, Rick?
One additional.
Could you come, I'm sorry, you have to have the microphone so I can record it.
My apologies. I did have one additional comment that was a concern, and that is Alex has stated that the project will take 11 months. Obviously, typically construction projects go longer than that. My big concern is that Alex has provided no place for staging any of the equipment, cranes, trucks, all that sort of thing. So those vehicles are going to be blocking both Lindale Avenue and the alleys. That is a use concern that I have, and that was just one other comment I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Commissioners, we have 7 items before us. Would anybody like to start discussion on this? I know I actually had a question for staff, so maybe people are pondering. Peter, could I? My question was in regard to stormwater mitigation and if there are any efforts being proposed by the applicant.
The city typically does not require stormwater best management practices for projects of this size. Generally, it's 1 acre or larger that we would require that. I would note that the project is meeting the minimum impervious surface requirement for the R5 district.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to start discussion on this or make a motion? Commissioner Sweezy.
Looking at the approvals that are necessary for this project, the rezoning to me, going from the R2B to the R5 seems to be, I think there's support for that. My concerns come with the variances that go along with this particular project. And I think that, as in some other cases where we've seen them, the problem will be justifying the findings for them, as I don't think that they are circumstances unique to the parcel of land on which we're discussing the project, but to the project that intends to go onto the parcel of land. I agree with a number of the speakers' comments that the project is too large, and that's what creates the need for the variances. As I said, I think perhaps a rezoning is fine, but a 19-unit, 4-story building for me that requires all of these variances, basically maximizing the piece of property to the limits of the lot, I think are a problem, and I don't think that those are circumstances unique to the land on which the property will sit. So while I think for me personally I would support a motion to rezone the property, the variances for me will cause significant problems.
Thank you, Commissioner Sweezy. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a motion or have discussion on this? Commissioner Coleman.
I would echo Commissioner Sweezy's comments, but I am concerned also about the R5 rezoning. I'm not convinced that this parcel in particular, even with the nearby R5 zoning, is one that should be rezoned because of the size of this parcel. If you look at the map, the other R5 parcels are larger and more suited to accommodating R5 type uses. This parcel, as we have heard described and as I observed when I reviewed the materials, is more like an R2B residential parcel than it is like an R5. And I would not be in support of the rezoning. I think the act of development is a partnership with the city. The city cannot redevelop a parcel on its own, so it is by de facto a partnership. I don't see the partnership in this application. I see it tending toward one side and not toward the city side. I do also want to say and correct one thing that was mentioned, that staff has not approved any plan. Staff has not approved any variances or rezoning. Staff has a function here. It is not to approve or deny anything. And I guess I'll correct one other perhaps misperception. The Planning Commission is not being driven by the 2040 plan. We are looking at findings that relate to the current comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Can I get an actual motion from somebody on this item? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yes, I'd like to go against staff recommendation and recommend denial of the rezoning, item A.
Is there a second on that motion? There's a motion and a second to deny the rezoning application. Is there any discussion on this item? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I think I can echo a lot what Commissioner Coleman just stated. This is a single-family lot that I don't think, based on the holistic proposal of this project, is ready for the R5 zoning.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call roll? Sorry, Commissioner Part second, Lisa. Can you address the required findings really briefly? I think they're alluded to, but in more specific cases.
I think based on the size of the project and the lack of the context related to not only the single-family and duplex homes, but the surrounding commercial properties and the lack of new development in the area. I think that was alluded to by one of the commenters, that there is redevelopment in the broader area, but the specific area has not seen much of any redevelopment.
Thank you, Commissioner Kronzer. And I would just add, too, that I do think that it was pointed out numerous times that it does appear to be in the sole interest of the property owner and not in the public interest necessarily. And also with finding number 4, that there are reasonable uses permitted under the existing zoning. And with that, clerk, would you please call the roll? And this is a motion to deny the variance, or to deny the rezoning.
Ron?
No.
Coleman? Aye. Ellison?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
No.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
No.
That's 4-3.
All right, that motion passes. Can I get another motion?
I'd like to make a motion to deny the variance requests for items B, the floor area ratio, item C, the minimum front yard setback, item D, the minimum interior side yard setback, item E, the minimum interior side yard setback, and variance F, the minimum rear yard setback.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this?
Yeah, I would say, this is our future as a planning commission, I think, as seeing bigger buildings next to smaller buildings. I don't see any care taken to respond to the existing context in this project. And that's something I certainly did talk about during the 2040 conversations, is that we will see bigger buildings next to smaller buildings, and they need to respond to that existing context, independent of what the zoning is of the adjacent properties.
Thank you, Commissioner Kronzer. Commissioner Schrader.
I just want to echo those points, like as we kind of move forward, not just being like the context, but also talking with neighbors, talking with what other city goals are you going to plan go forward. We haven't really talked, like we talked a little bit about stormwater, but I mean, environmental concerns, affordability concerns, all of these things can help projects go forward, but they just weren't lacking. We're lacking in this project.
Commissioner Coleman.
I would like to just itemize some of my specific reasons I will support the motion to not approve the variances, starting with the floor area ratio. I think the justification that says, were the project to provide enclosed parking, it would qualify for a 20% bonus in the FAR. is not relevant. We could all think about things that developers might do anytime that if they did them, we would give them bonuses for. I don't think that should show up as a reason for supporting a variance. In regards to the interior side setbacks and minimum rear yard setback, I see this as nothing. There are no practical difficulties. I agree with many of the people that have spoken today. These are choices by the developer that have created these situations. It is nothing unique to the lot. The proposed setbacks are not compatible with the surrounding development, surrounding uses, and the building will interfere with adequate light, given that it is on the south side of two-story residential buildings. The front yard setback is very concerning to me. The front yard, primarily because of two factors. One, the interaction with the landscaping that is proposed here. The landscaping is minimal. The hardscaping in the front yard for outdoor space for these units is pretty laughable to me. Why create the situation where you've eliminated all of your side yard outdoor uses and your backyard outdoor uses and then put hardscape in the front yard where it's going to impact the entire block? That is just not compelling to me. And those are the primary reasons.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other comments, clerk, would you please call roll? It's motions to deny the variances B, C, D, E, and F.
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
7-0.
That motion passes. Those variances have been denied. Commissioner Kronzer.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the site plan review.
Is there a second? Second. A motion and a second? Is there any discussion on this? I think it goes without saying that since none of the previous applications were approved, that the findings are pretty consistent here. And with that, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
7-0.
All right, and that motion passes. The site plan review has been denied. Thank you for your time. Next up, we will hear 2812 Fremont Avenue South. And if you could take any discussions out into the hallway, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. Item number 6 is for the property located at 2812 Fremont Avenue South. The subject property is zoned R5, and the existing land use is a two-family dwelling with a detached garage. The applicant has applied for 2 variances and site plan review to allow for a new 10-unit residential building. The first variance is to reduce the south interior side yard setback from 11 feet down to 5 feet 9 inches. And then the second variance is to allow for essentially maneuvering in the alley. There is 22 feet required behind all parking stalls for any use, residential use that has more than 5 dwelling units of 22 feet. And the applicant is proposing approximately 4 feet behind those 2 parking stalls that you see adjacent to the alley. The proposed multiple-family dwelling is located within a quarter mile of the number 6 transit stop at 28th and Hennepin, and therefore there is no minimum off-street parking required. However, the applicant is proposing those 2 off-street parking spaces. The lot is 45 feet and 1 inch wide. The existing zoning is R5, which is a high-density district. Staff is recommending approval of the 2 variances in site plan review based on the following findings. First is that for the reduced setback along the south interior side yard, staff finds that practical difficulty does exist due to circumstances unique to this lot based on the existing lot width and the adjacent use being open space. The lot is 45 feet, 1 inch wide, as I mentioned, and the zoning district allows for 4 stories as a maximum height. That would bring us to 11-foot side yard setbacks on both sides. The applicant's providing 11 foot 2 inches along the north interior side yard to provide some relief to the residential uses to the north, and that remainder is 5 feet 9 inches on the south side. The zoning allows for high-density residential units up to 120 dwelling units per acre, so we would expect to have approximately 16 units on this site at maximum, and as I mentioned before, 10 are the proposed. Staff was evaluated the fact that the property to the south is open space, which would have a more limited impact than a residential use. The property to the south is used as a dog park that is used as an amenity space for the property located at 2838 Fremont Avenue South. Project is known as the Flux. Staff further finds under finding 2 that the applicant is proposing to utilize the property in a reasonable manner consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. So the reason why we have setbacks is to provide for orderly development of land use and minimize conflicts amongst other land uses and provide adequate air, light, and open space and separation of uses. And again, when evaluating the site, staff felt as though the siting of the proposed structure made sense to allow for more separation and less of a shadowing or air impact to the residential use to the north, and therefore recommends approval of the proposed setback at 5 feet 9 inches on the south. And for the same reason, staff believes that the proposed variance will not alter the essential character of the locality or be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity. For the second variance, the variance to allow for maneuvering in the alley, the applicant has decided to provide off-street parking, although none is required. Those 2 off-street parking spaces, one will be van accessible handicap stall, 18 feet wide, and one would be a standard stall. So typically we would see this kind of parking configuration for a single family home, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. In those cases, we would allow for the maneuvering to occur in the alley. So with that in mind, staff felt as though this was a reasonable request to allow for the maneuvering of just the 2 parking spaces within the alley, because it's no more than what we would expect for uses that were permitted to do so. The applicant is not seeking any alternative compliance for site plan review. So staff is recommending approval of the 2 variances. There are no additional conditions placed on those 2 variances. And then recommending approval of the site plan review with 7 stated conditions on page 12 of the staff report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? I see none. Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks very much.
Would the applicant like to come up and speak on this item?
Hi, Danny Perkins, 2817 Girard Avenue South. I think Shannon did a great job describing the project, and this is Mick Stoddard with DJR.
Michael Stoddard with DJR Architecture, 333 Washington Avenue North.
Thank you.
When we did present to the neighborhood, we did discuss the affordable piece, and I know I had some rough stats, but I wanted to present with you guys as well. We already have a project that we built that was approved on 2008 Bryant Avenue South. And that project is 10% of the building is affordable at less than 70% AMI, and then 60% of the building is affordable at less than 80% AMI. So we are targeting those rents as well. Thank you. Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Thank you. All right. If there's anybody in the public that would like to speak, come up to the microphone, give your name and address to the record.
Hi, my name is Beth Harrington. I live 2804 Fremont, so property 2 doors north of the proposed project. And I'm speaking here as someone who has lived through 28th and Fremont. I described to friends and colleagues alike that I live in the epicenter of development of Uptown. So we have lived through Flux, which, as everyone knows, was the first of the high-rise to go up along the Greenway. So our block, shortly after moving into our residence, it's 10.5 years ago, the zoning was changed. I understand that our block is zoned R5 or R6, and it's going to all eventually be high-rise apartments. So I want to speak to the things that are actually really important to us, single-family home dwellers who still live in the area, and that is parking and alley access. So parking, I think you've heard a lot from previous speakers, that I understand the proposers or developers are feeling that they're being generous by allowing 2 parking units per place, but the reality is that this is a 10-unit building. 9 of the 10 units, to my understanding, are 2-bedroom units, so we can expect that there are 2 adults living in those units, and those folks have cars. And as much, we are close to the Metro Center. I understand that the city is moving towards bike and public transportation, but the reality is that most of these folks have cars, and if they do not, their families and their friends do. And when they come in from the suburbs, they park along our streets, and that is the reality, and that's adding to the congestion of the area and a decrease of livability for those of us who are in single-family homes. Secondly is the alley access. And 2 years ago, I was here along with my neighbors when the Boutique 28 40-unit building went up on Girard, which is directly across from us. And we argued vehemently for a loading zone to be included with, a loading unloading zone to be included with in the alley. And we were successful with that, and I will give Drew and Danny credit for listening to us, because that has made a huge difference. So our alley, Flux, as you know, these are rental units. People move in and out of these twice a month, and they have U-Haul trucks. And if they don't have U-Haul trucks, they have several vans full of friends, and they block the alley. And I will say that with the Boutique 28, because we lobbied so strongly for a loading and unloading zone, we have been blocked, I can count exactly once, by people moving in and out of that unit in almost 2 years. Whereas with the Flux building, which refuses to put up signs saying that people cannot stop and block the alley, that's still a regular occurrence that we are blocked. And that affects not only our access to our houses and our garages, but also for delivery and emergency vehicles. So those are my 2 points that I want to make, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? If so, come to the microphone, state your name and address to the record.
Hi, I'm Richard Kadeen Powell Karras. I'm here representing my mother, who's the property owner of 2808 Fremont Avenue South, directly north of the proposed site. And I'm speaking specifically to a concern about our shared driveway that was built approximately 25 years ago. And, we believe we have a prescripted easement to the 2812 half of the driveway, and are concerned about the current site plan and what that would do to our access to our garage and driveway space. And so I'm just putting that on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
So there's an alley, if you could explain for me, there's an alley and a shared driveway? I'm not clear.
There was, originally it was like a sand driveway. No, there's two garages, all right? And the driveway is in between them. To get it, the driveway has like a steep slope to it, it's cement. And to pull in to one side or the other, you have to pass over the adjacent property's driveway. So, we've consistently for over 25 years been utilizing, the other half of the driveway.
So let me see if I understand correctly. So you both properties are accessing from the alley.
Yes.
To the garages.
Correct.
And what you're talking about is using the pad or the sand of the other property and vice versa.
Yeah, it's paved now.
And when you say prescriptive easement, what do you mean?
I mean, we've been using that land for a long time, and so we actually have we've consulted legal consult, and, they say we have a claim to the right of that to continue to use that space. So that's a concern about the current site plan and, how they're, going to build in that vicinity. So one other note, too, I just want to say that I know originally this unit was, a two-unit building, but many years ago it was renovated, and it's only been a one-unit building for a long time, and that's a discrepancy. And also in the site plan, they talk about, cutting down trees. They're saying they're only cutting down one tree, but it looks to me like they're going to be cutting down actually 3 mature trees. And I just want to say, there's some negligence in this, kind of how they're spinning this. So I think it's important that this gets re-examined before there's further kind of process. So.
Are there any other questions for the speaker? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? In a minute, I'm going to let the public hearing happen first. Hi.
Hi, my name is Rachel Usher. I'm at 2532 Aldrich Avenue South. I'm a board member of Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Association. I'm also an architect, a local architect, and I'm an active member of the American Institute of Architects. I want to just start by saying that my wife and I moved to Minneapolis from Phoenix, Arizona 6 years ago because we love the community that is represented here. And that is it was so explicitly seen in the Wedge neighborhood in Lowry Hill East and so many of our neighborhoods, so we're really proud to be here. I just wanted to raise a point. I want to second all the wonderful things that have been said here tonight and thank the Commission for their attention to what is sort of fundamentally a flaw to what one of the gentlemen had said earlier. One of the sort of I don't want to go so far as to say flaw, but one of the challenges with 2040 plan and our current zoning, I'm sure it's not lost on everybody here that this building looks a lot like the last one we were just talking about. It's important to note that that the property, the R5 property that this home is going on, butts up against an R6 zoned property that was actually allowed to, when Flux was developed, was allowed to be developed into a surface level dog park. So in terms of the context of the neighborhood and the context of the block, which is so important to where we live, it's actually, the form of the structure itself is entirely out of context with what has been approved to the south. And then, of course, as two of my neighbors have stated here tonight, the homes to the north are actually extremely well-maintained fabric homes that we want to be respectful of. These homes aren't going anywhere anytime soon. We understand that the properties are zoned for higher density. And let me tell you, everyone in our neighborhood is all about higher density, more affordable housing. We want more people, more diverse people in our neighborhood. But we also really want to be respectful of the form of the fabric of our neighborhood. Important things to note with the massing of this property: existing homes in the fabric are responsive in terms of their form, in that their top is a pitched roof, so problems with shading that occur, as will occur with the property to the north with this property, similar to the last one we spoke about, are lessened. The scale of the building itself is decreased in those moves. The idea of a front porch and the interstitial spaces between the privacy of the home and the publicity, the public space of the sidewalk. All of these are very important, and they're so important to how our community functions. So I just wanted to go on record, and we just have so many of these homes coming into our neighborhood that are just, they're pulling away from what makes our neighborhood work. And, you know, again, it's not about too many units or, you know, the parking conversation is a much bigger one than we've even started to dive into today, but I just wanted to put that on record for the massing of the building itself.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this issue? Come
on. Nico Harrington, 2804 Fremont Avenue South. To add on to what my mom said earlier about the parking situation, it does have a cascading effect. 2 lots is not enough for this proposed building. There will be additional people parking on the street, and that means that available free parking will be pushed further out into the solely single housing areas of further down on 28th, further north, further other cardinal direction I'm forgetting. That leads to people that come here on the weekend for the bars and such. When they come home at 2 a.m., very loud and very drunk, they will be traveling further out. This leads to 2 people who are on our block who aren't here today. Neither of their residences have parking. Thankfully, we have a garage, we have a driveway, but neither of those 2802 and whatever, I don't know, the other one have their own parking. They have to rely on street parking, which will become irrefutably harder to find with the addition of this building. Yeah, that's it, sorry.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on this item and begin discussion with the commissioners. I did have a question for the applicant in regard to that easement. If you could explain, as it was brought up in testimony.
Yeah, there's no easement. It's a continuous drive. So, I mean, that's to try to, you know, he's got his driveway, we have our driveway, the property stake is set. To make it an easy fix, we can switch the enclosed trash recycle and the bike parking on the south side. So we'd have parking on there, so it'd be a little bit easy maneuvering back and forth, and that's easy to accommodate.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, commissioners.
Sorry, I had another question for the applicant. Will this building be managed such where the parking can be used for move in, move out?
Yes, I was actually going to address that as well privately. Yeah, we own the building, 2817 Girard, the one that she was referring to, and part of our property, we're going to manage both properties, and we can utilize that loading zone for move-in, move-outs as well.
All right, commissioners, can I get a motion on this item? We have 3 applications before us. Commissioner Brown.
Yes, I'll start things off. I will move approval of variance A for the south interior side yard setback.
So motion, is there a second? Second. So motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, clerk, would you please call roll on variance A?
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy. 7-0.
That motion passes. Commissioner Brown.
Now I'll continue along with a motion to approve item B, the variance for minimum drive aisle width.
Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Coleman.
I have a question for staff, whether or not it would be appropriate on this motion or the site plan review to include the requirement that the applicant offered of moving the kind of utility bike shelter and trash recycle to the other side of the parking.
I think that one would be more appropriate to add to the site plan review application.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this? Right, seeing none, clerk, would you please call roll on the approval of the variance to reduce the minimum drive aisle width?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Cronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
7-0.
That motion passes. Commissioner Brown?
Yes, and I will continue along with a motion to approve item C, the site plan review with the 7 stated conditions, and I'd like to add an 8th, as Commissioner Coleman stated, that the applicant work with the neighboring property owner on relocation of the parking to the rear of the building.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Cronzer?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up what one of the testifiers said about this. Is a very similar on its surface project to the last one we looked at, but a few things I wanted to note that are different. The existing zoning is R5 here. There's no request for a zoning change. The front yard setback is much greater here. It actually matches the house to the north. There is an actual front porch on this project, which is very much in character with the neighborhood. There has been significant redevelopment in the area, even the adjoining property has been redeveloped. And the building itself, the materials and design of it actually are much more compatible with the neighborhood than the project before. So just wanted to make those minor points.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right. Seeing none, clerk, would you please call roll on the site plan review with the 8 stated conditions, including the one I'm working with the neighbor regarding the parking relocation? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Brown?
Aye.
Coleman? Aye. Ellison? Aye. Cronzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy? Aye. 7-0.
And that motion passes, and I would encourage the applicant to get contact information for, even though you know where they live, to exchange. Thank you. All right. Next up is 4715 Cedar Avenue South, the Nokomis mixed-use project.
Good afternoon. Item number 7 is for the properties located at 4715 Cedar Avenue South and 4720 Longfellow Avenue. You can see, based on the zoning map before you, the site is zoned C2, which is the Neighborhood Corridor Commercial District. The site is also located within the Airport Overlay District. The hatched line that runs the lines, if you will, denote the floodplain overlay district, and then the entire site is within the shoreline overlay district. The site is just over, it's 1.31 acres. Some land use features are we are within a neighborhood commercial node here for Cedar and Minnehaha, and Cedar Avenue is a community corridor. The subject properties are located mid-block between Cedar and Longfellow Avenues, between 47th and Minnehaha. The existing use is the Bergen Super Value grocery store. It's an existing one-story building with surface parking surrounding. There's an existing shared parking agreement with Carbonis and Corkdorp to the north, and that is to remain as part of this proposed development. And I'll get a little more into the traffic and parking as we continue through the presentation. As noted, part of the site is within the floodplain overlay that introduces additional requirements for both the city of Minneapolis and the watershed. So for the city of Minneapolis, we require that the applicant bring up the first floor elevation at least a foot above the regulatory flood protection elevation, whereas the Minnehaha Creek watershed requires additional. It's actually about 2.3 feet. From what the existing is. In addition to that, the applicant is required to prepare the site within 15 feet in front of the structure, so towards Cedar Avenue, up to that additional foot. So 15 feet beyond those outside limits of the structure. As noted, the site is within the shoreland overlay district, so uniquely in this particular circumstance, we're not within 1,000 feet of one of the lakes. We are not within 300 feet of Minnehaha Creek. The reason why the shoreland overlay is applicable to this property is that because the site is within 300 feet of the landward extent of the floodplain designation. So again, it's not based on the specific water body, but it's based on the location of that floodplain overlay district. The applicant is proposing a new mixed-use building with 130 rental dwelling units and a new grocery store, approximately 22,500 square feet. The building is proposed to be 5 stories. The first floor off of Cedar Avenue will be the grocery store. It has the principal entrance facing Cedar Avenue and access to parking provided via curb cut along Cedar Avenue. Along Longfellow, there is the proposed residential amenity, residential lobby, and then also access to the second floor parking garage. Here you can see on the site plan, Cedar Avenue, Longfellow. There's a 2-way drive aisle through the site. This portion of the parking is enclosed on the first floor. There's 25 spaces here. These are shared with, as I mentioned earlier, the other 82 surface parking stalls that are actually on a separate property. So if you can follow the hand here, this denotes the 2 properties together that are before you today. The applicant is also proposing some additional landscaping amenities on off-site, but that is not related to today's applications. As I mentioned before, the residential lobby is here off of Longfellow, amenity space with fitness, and this is the ramp that accesses the second floor of the enclosed parking for the residential. The second floor has 121 parking spaces with 9 tandems, so 130 spaces total on the second floor. The maximum height in the C2 district is 4 stories, not to exceed 56 feet. However, with the shoreland overlay regulations, the height is reduced to 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. The purpose of that ordinance is to protect views from those significant water bodies, where in this case, that is not the factor for why the shoreland applies to this property. In addition to the conditional use permit to increase the maximum height, the applicant is also asking for relief via conditional use permit to prevent bringing up the fill, if you will, in the public right-of-way, both the sidewalk and then Cedar Avenue. The applicant is seeking a variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio from 2.04 to 2.45. And then finally, site plan review for the new mixed-use building. Staff is recommending approval of the applications before you today. There are a number of findings related to each of the conditional use permits, so I'll touch on most of those, particularly around how staff arrived at our recommendation. I'm happy to go into further detail as requested. As previously noted, the maximum, so first, staff is recommending approval of the variance to increase the maximum height in the shoreline overlay. The C2 district allows for a 4-story building not to exceed 56 feet. That would be measured typically to the roof deck. In the shoreline overlay, we measure to the very top of all structures. So in this case, the proposed building is 59.4 to the roof deck and 72.4 to the top of that elevator stair tower on the roof. The property is in the floodplain overlay, as I mentioned, which prohibits really allowing for underground or enclosed parking below the structure, and that then brings the building up quite a bit. So as we noted also, 2.3 feet is also required to bring the building up. So that gets us even over the 56 feet. Let's see, of what would otherwise be allowed in the C2 district. Further, that the applicant has to provide required off-street parking. This particular project does not qualify for a transit incentive to reduce its off-street parking requirement for the residential uses. So therefore, all the required parking has to be provided on site. So with those conditions present, staff found that the proposed building height would not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, general welfare, provided that the development complies with the applicable building codes. There will be additional permits required through the watershed. Staff did not find that the conditional use would be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity or impede on normal and orderly development. Shoreland Overlay District in particular is established to preserve and enhance environmental qualities such as surface waters and the natural economic values of shoreland areas. So as previously noted, there's not impact to either the lakes or the creek. And in speaking with Public Works again today related to the stormwater management plan for the site, which this site is subject to, Public Works would not be able to approve a project that did not comply fully with stormwater management requirements. Where we are in the process is so far PDR has been the preliminary development review. So the site plan is preliminarily, including the stormwater management report and travel demand management report, been reviewed by Public Works, and essentially what they say at this point is the applicant is on the right track and will have to verify compliance through the next stage if land use is approved. Staff notes policies of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth that the project is in compliance with. I know it's been mentioned several times this evening, but we have received quite a few comments, particularly related to this project as it relates to the designation for built form and land use in the 2040 plan. The 2040 plan, as you know, is not relevant for this project today, and that project was reviewed for compliance with comprehensive plan policies with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth. The applicant has provided shadow studies for the increased height, showing minimal shadowing to the commercial properties and surface parking to the north and the west, mostly during the winter solstice. There are small areas of the Hiawatha Golf Course that will be shadowed in the late afternoon, also during the winter solstice. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed height increase would not impact the access to light or air for the surrounding properties. Further, staff looked for any existing solar energy systems, and the nearest one was over 1,000 feet away northwest of the subject property, which would not be impacted by the proposed building height increase. Staff does note that the building heights in the area are mostly 1 to 2 stories, and the subject property is subject to this CUP only because of the shoreline designation. And again, notes the minimal shadowing on commercial properties. There are no residential properties that appear to be shadowed by the proposed structure. Staff also notes that there are no landmark buildings or historic districts near the subject property. And then on to the shoreline findings specifically to the conditional use permit. The applicants provided a geotechnical report, an erosion control and sediment plan with recommendations for prevention of soil erosion and offsite impacts due to the floodplain, both during and after construction. That was included in the very large packet that we provided to you today. As previously noted, staff from Public Works have evaluated the preliminary submission for these reports and documents, and a copy of the PDR report is attached today. As far as limiting visibility of structures from the protected waters, that is not applicable here. Similarly, the property does not have any direct access to protected water. There are a number of floodplain findings, as I mentioned earlier. Essentially, staff finds that they are consistent with those findings. I can go into detail if the Planning Commission prefers on any of those 1 through 11. If not, I'll move on to the second conditional use permit. Sounds good. Okay. So the second conditional use permit is to reduce the minimum extension of fill from 15 feet to 0 feet. So essentially the building is right up to the property line in portions along Cedar Avenue. And as noted, it would be impractical to make modifications to the public right-of-way within 15 feet out from the structure. And therefore staff finds that the conditional use permit should be approved. Moving on to the variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio. Staff finds that practical difficulties do exist to increase the maximum FAR due to the floodplain designation of the property. The applicant is not able to provide, or the applicant is required to raise the building up. That reduces the ability to provide additional residential amenities or other things that where the bulk is located above ground, below grade. Further, the applicant of course, wanted to apply for the variance to, or I'm sorry, the density bonus. All of the required parking is required to be enclosed in order to qualify for that density bonus. In this case, every single parking stall on site is within the enclosed building. However, due to a shared parking agreement, some of those required spaces are surface parking. So unfortunately, we're not able to give the density bonus. The spirit and intent is certainly met in that, again, everything that they can do within their control to qualify for that density bonus has been done just through how the zoning code is applied in this manner. They are not able to qualify for that particular density bonus. So a combination of the floodplain designation and then the shared parking agreement. Staff finds that practical difficulties do exist, and also that the proposed variance to increase the FAR is consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The applicant is and so for staff finds that the proposed variance to increase the FAR will not alter the essential character of the locality or be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity. Again, relating back to allowing a maximum 2.45 FAR, part of it is based on elevating the structure, part of it is not being able to count towards the density bonus. All of the on-site parking is within the structure, and 20 of those spaces would be shared with Carboni's Pizza and Cork Dork to the north. For site plan review, staff is recommending that the applicant comply with two requirements where they've asked for alternative compliance. So I'll move on to that. So staff found that the wood-looking metal siding facing Longfellow, the intent, our understanding is to make the residential side of the building look different from the commercial sides of the building facing Cedar north and south. And so they've introduced a fourth material on the Longfellow side on the east elevation. Staff is recommending that be reduced to the point where it's more of an accent material to make the building look consistent on all four sides. And then again, not using more than 3 exterior materials. Staff also noted that we would like to see the wood look slats that you see covering the parking facade along Cedar Avenue, and it kind of wraps the two corners. We'd like to see that to improve the second floor where the proposed enclosed parking would exist. So, as noted, staff is recommending approval of the requested land use applications for the 2 conditional use permits, variance and site plan review with stated conditions on page 25 of the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. In the staff report, it talks about the grocery store parking. Mm-hmm. Is it 25 stalls required to be on site or 16?
It's greater than 25. I believe it's, let me find that. The minimum off-street parking required for the grocery store is 37. They're providing 16 on site, but then there's 82 parking spaces that are shared in the surface lots, kind of northwest and north of the site.
Okay. And then, we have this requirement for visibility in and out of retail shops between 4 feet and 7 feet above adjacent grade.
Yes.
So in this case, the first floor building's already raised 3 feet.
Sure.
So that means a foot above the finished floor is where that clear dimension would start. Is that correct?
That would be correct. I think we'll probably have to have the applicant make sure that we're doing those calculations correctly for the minimum distance. We may have to consider alternative compliance in that case, because if the sidewalk elevation is much lower than it otherwise would be, it would be difficult to comply with the 4 to 7 feet.
Well, it's also quite important, I think.
I'm sorry, say
It's
that
also
again.
quite important to provide that visibility from the public sidewalk into the store.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know, that's not part of this application, I don't believe.
The applicant is showing an elevation of 100 feet from, it's a difference of 3 feet from the public sidewalk. And they are showing windows at that 100 level. So as proposed, it appears as though it would comply. What we have asked as a condition of approval, which is standard with grocery stores and uses of the same, is a merchandising plan to ensure that we
So I
don't
guess my
have.
question, I want to be assured that we will be following the 4 to 7 feet from the exterior grade.
Correct.
Okay.
That is as conditioned.
Okay, great. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for staff? Commissioner Coleman?
Jenna, you lost me a little bit when you were talking about the additional material on the side facing the residential.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy
So
to go
if you
back.
could go over that again and maybe point out exactly what you're talking about.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So these are the 3 facades. This facade here in the middle is what faces Cedar Avenue. That's the west facade. This is the north elevation that would face the surface parking, Cork Dork, and Carbones. This is the south facade that would face the Grand Old Creamery, Caribou. These 3 facades all have consistent materials on all 3 sides. When we go to the Longfellow elevation, which faces east, you can see that they introduced this wood-looking material, and it's at a percentage that would be beyond what we would consider to be an accent material. And so I've talked with the applicant today, and I'm sure they're prepared with how they would like to respond, saying that if we can reduce it in such that it's an accent material, maybe something just on the first floor or something where the balconies are inset, that it would comply with the conditions as requested by staff.
All right, thank you, Shanna.
Thanks very much.
Would the applicant like to come up and speak?
Oh, here.
Thank you. Johnny Carlson, the applicant of Trammell Crow, 700 Commerce Drive, Oak Brook, Illinois. Thank you very much, Shanna, and thank you for your time this evening. We're excited to talk to you about a project that we've been working on with staff and had a neighbor meeting and had a meeting with Cow about a month ago. We took all your feedback to heart. We met with our team, we met with consultants, and I think Lucas and Neil are going to do a good job of walking you through some of the changes that we've made in response to some of the feedback we heard directly from your team. Before I go into just introducing the team, I just want to make sure we're here for questions, but ESG Architects is here. They're going to walk through a brief overview. Kinley Horn is here to answer any civil and traffic related items, and Damon Farber with regards to landscape. And I believe at the Cow meeting I wasn't able to identify the grocer given where we were at in the transaction, but Mitch Avery from Lunds Byerly's is also here in attendance. So if you have any operational questions, anything about their business, how they work with the community to hire and such, we're really excited to have them in our ground floor and be a unique tenant for the neighborhood. And obviously this process has to take shape, but we're all here for questions. So with that, I'm going to invite Lucas Van Sistine up with ESG to walk you through some of the modifications.
Hello, Commissioners. Neil Reardon, ESG Architecture and Design.
And Lucas Van Sistine with ESG Architecture.
500 Washington East. So we reviewed this project, many of you, on March 28th at the Committee of the Whole. So we wanted to go over a few brief project changes we've made since then, as well as feedback from city staff and through the initial PDR process. So first item would be we had some feedback that the width of the curb entrance along Cedar, so this is this area I'm pointing at right here, previously was 22 feet wide and now has been reduced to 16 feet, so we wanted to note that change. One thing that was noted from staff as well as from the commission at COW was more bike parking locations. So can you hit Thank you. We've added a few on the southwest corner of the property. So we made a couple modifications there, which I'll talk about in a second. But addition of bike parking there, you can additionally see the other two areas there. And this is really the bike parking to serve the grocer. The residential bike parking is handled on a different floor within the building. Let's talk about the ground floor.
Sure, and we appreciate the comments we received at Committee of the Whole, and we did do our best to incorporate those. And I think one of the main ones was the sense of scale and creating a little bit more intimate scale along this facade and also the east facade. And so what we did do along this facade, you can see kind of breaking down the scale at the steps, where there's sort of another step, and that could be, the intent is that there's sort of a seat wrapping along and then back at the inset there and then out. And then also adding some sort of plantings at the entry there to kind of soften the materiality there. And another element that you can see in this image is we previously had an art wall at that inset. You can see kind of the seating there, and that wall was an opaque art wall, so now there's visibility through there. And the only other comment we had here is with the awnings. We brought down the scale, kind of brought them down so it feels a little more pedestrian, and then also added the planters along Cedar Avenue here.
So next item that was changed came out of with Public Works. We had an outboard stair and stoop coming from an emergency egress stair shaft along Cedar. We've since moved that inboard and incorporated an art wall that you can see there, so that that stair exiting is happening kind of underneath the levels, the upper levels of the building, and it's happening there at level 1. All our doors, as noted by staff earlier, we are needing to be 2 feet above the floodplain, so we have every exit door in the building needs to be at that height and not down lower, so that's thus the need for the stoop and stair on the exterior. In addition, that art wall there that was previously closer to the entrance has been moved to this location closer to the southwest portion of the building. What we're illustrating here, I'd like to show is following a preliminary code review meeting with the city, and through our own evaluation, we really needed to do 2 accessible entrances. So we've added a sloped walk at the corner of the northwest part of the building. So this really makes the northwest entry to the grocery. There's 2 entries to the grocery, one at the midpoint in the covered portion of the grocery parking, and then one at the northwest corner. We're moving, since we submitted for land use, to make both of those accessible locations. So it does affect the sidewalk on the north side of the northwesternmost portion of the grocery.
So the east facade is another facade that we gave more attention to the detail here. You can see that there's we previously had kind of an art wall expression there, which we still do, and we've kind of made it a little bit more granular rather than larger images. And we do plan to work with an artist to further develop this. But some other things that we did to bring down the scale is again, add the planters there. So that's a kind of a 3-foot height, and then add the plantings within it. And then you can see at the top of the art wall piece, there's sort of an eyebrow. And then also adding lighting along that facade to give a little more intimate scale there. And then this would be looking kind of from the other direction. And as Shannon mentioned, you can see kind of the wood look along the top. We would like to work with staff on that. It's regarded as a primary material because of the amount of it, and I think that's something we can work with them on to use another material there so that doesn't become considered a primary material. The other piece we looked at here, we looked at wrapping, as staff had mentioned, wrapping that kind of trellis expression around the building, and we looked at it, and what it does to the overall composition is it sort of joins and makes it look like one larger thing, rather than what we're trying to do is at the grocery really call that out as something special and kind of break down the scale of it by using that, and it's more of a wayfinding piece to say this is grocery. So what we did do is add a similar element at the lobby facade, different color but kind of a similar look, to say this is lobby, just to both respond to the comment at Committee of the Whole of that second story as kind of being not quite there, but then also to respond to staff as well to give a little more of that look on this facade.
Okay, I think that wraps it up. We're here for any questions as well as our full team, civil engineers, landscape architects.
We do. We also brought material board also. I don't know if it's not that easy to pass around, but we have it here.
Any questions for the architects? Commissioner Conrad.
Hi, I appreciate the changes and adjustments you've made since the Committee of the Whole meeting. I did have a question. The fabric awnings, what is the dimension to the underside of the fabric awnings?
I have.
For the bottom of it?
It's 13 feet.
Okay, and then you have, it looks like ornamental trees planted.
Yes, so the intent of those is that we'd work with Jesse Damon Farber so that those are not, they're fitting in their zone of growth. They're nice to have a little bit of that softness, but there's a limit to how tall they can grow.
Okay,
so we've talked about it, and I don't know the specific species offhand, but we've talked about that.
And can you restate why you didn't continue this wood screen light material across the south elevation?
So that would be, so in this image, your
south elevation.
Sure, which probably doesn't show up.
You're able to see it there a little bit on the left. The south elevation we didn't really want to announce as either being grocery or explicitly residential. So that would be the reason why we've proposed the black screening where we did, and then kept the wood look screening as we have it.
And I don't have an image, but it isn't highly visible as you're walking by with existing buildings and trees and things.
Last question, can you, and maybe this is for Kimley Horn, talk about what the approach for stormwater management is going to be, or what you're working towards?
Yeah, I'd be happy to have our civil engineer come up and address that. Any other questions for us?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ben Johnson, Kimley Horn. Address is 767 Eustis Street.
So, what is the approach to stormwater management? What are you doing to hold water on site?
We have underground detention in the surface parking area on the northeast side of the site.
Okay.
It's within the building, not in the building, but it's underneath the parking on the, is it that one? Oh yeah. So I guess the majority of the site does drain to Longfellow, so we're maintaining that by putting our stormwater system in the northeast corner between our building columns. So it'll be in large underground pipes beneath the parking, and there'll be their treatment manholes to meet.
So are you taking 1.1 inch? And what's the rate? What do you do in the treat the stormwater?
Yeah, we're taking the 2-inch runoff event.
2 inch.
So for the watershed standards, we have to meet a higher standard for the type of device that we're using. So it's the 2-inch event over the disturbed area of the site.
Okay, and does that include quality and volume control
Yep.
as well?
So due to our site constraints, we're not able to do infiltration. So we have a treatment manhole that will filter the water essentially. We've used this device several times in the city of Minneapolis before, but there will be about 1,000 feet of pipe that will, slow down the water and slowly release it into this treatment manhole that filters it slowly. So in your smaller events, all of your runoff will be from the off-site, from the Carboni site, and from the new building will be filtered through that device. Yep.
All right. Did you still have someone from Damon Farber, or is your presentation just for questions? Got it. Okay. At this time, before I get public testimony, wanted to kind of get a show of hands of how many people are here to testify on this item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, okay, great. I ask that you stay on point to the land applications in front of us and try to avoid redundancy, but I do want to hear what you have to say, so I won't be limiting to the 2-minute clock this time. But also, please try not to go for an hour. Whoever wants to come to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record. Anybody?
My name is Andrew Allgood. I live at 2416 East 43rd. I'm a 25-year resident of the neighborhood. I actually am kind of excited about some progress in our neighborhood. However, I'm extremely concerned about the height of the project. That bothers me from a standpoint that is our park system. This is our Minnehaha Park. It butts up along it, and I think this is starting a strange precedence for our park system, that we're going to be having large 72-foot buildings on the edge of our parks. If it was a little bit of a variance, I would understand that and accept that, but the 72 feet is what I find extremely concerning. I'm also very concerned about the traffic. If you guys ever drive down Cedar Avenue, especially these days, on a Friday or a Saturday, it is a challenge to get out of Cedar Avenue, and I'm afraid of what 130 more residential units will add to the traffic on Cedar Avenue specifically. Again, I just want to mention that this is our park system. The also thing I'm concerned about is the floodplain. We all do know that this is right next to Hiawatha Golf Course, which is under much controversy for its for all of its flood issues that are going on right now, and I am concerned about the flood additional water with the reducing of whatever the green area would be there for it. So that's all.
Thank you. No questions. The next speaker would like to come up to the microphone.
Carol Sursland, and I live at 5148 Elliott Avenue South, and growing up on the east side of Lake Nokomis, and now live on the west side of Lake Nokomis, so I know the area very well. A couple of my concerns are the runoff to the creek, and so one of my examples, I'm sure you have to go through a lot of the storm water, but it's like, could there be a rain garden on the roof of this facility so that it would prevent, when we have these really heavy rainfalls and we get these real big flushes to the creek, I don't know what they're building it to, but that might help prevent all that runoff and debris and nutrients going into the creek and then into Lake Nokomis and into Lake Hiawatha. The couple of things is, I know that from just briefly reading it, the developer, and it sounds like the planning staff is really counting on people going to be riding their bikes and walking to this facility, which is great, but for the fact that it's county, that it's a county highway. It's Cedar Avenue is also a county highway 77. And so for people to get across right now is very challenging. And so now with adding this amount of residents, and also I think Lunds Byerly's is counting very much on increasing the number of people who are shopping at that site. so people coming in and out. So one of the safety considerations is I didn't see anything in the design that accounts for people on bikes and on foot actually coming from the trail and to the facility or to the residence. And so now what you have, I mean, I think there's a small sidewalk there now, and that sidewalk isn't going to get any bigger. So now you have a really dangerous situation where more bikers and more pedestrians are trying to get from the creek, the trail that they're using, and to this facility or to Corkdork or to Carboni's. And so it just seems like having those setbacks right up to the sidewalk on both sides and on all sides of the facility creates a really dangerous situation for that increased bike ped traffic that you're counting on. So those are my concerns, are the setbacks and that there's no additional traffic engineering that's going to be added to the Parkway and Cedar. And I saw in the Kimberly Horn report that at I think it's the AM peak, it's already at C, it's going to go to D. So it seems like the developer could also pitch in on making some mitigation for traffic situations at Cedar and the Parkway. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I saw a few hands earlier, so come on up.
Hi, Matt Steele, 4412 18th Avenue South. I submitted lengthy written comments before, so I won't get into all those details, but I just wanted to offer my support again for this project and how excited I am to see this in my neighborhood. I'm 3 blocks away. I routinely walk or bike to the grocery store today, and I'm glad to see that there's a redevelopment plan that includes a grocery store because that's really important for me. My family, 2 adults with kids, is able to live with 1 car in this neighborhood, and I want to see that continue and see more families flourish like that. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do that in a part of Minneapolis that we live in. I've also been working for a number of years on a plan with some other stakeholders, Hennepin County, and some other people on trying to address the issues we just heard about with Cedar Avenue. I'm also extremely concerned about traffic on Cedar. I realize that doesn't have anything to do with any of the land use applications before, so I'll just kind of sidestep that. But I just want to say my concern is that there's too much traffic moving too fast, and I'm eager to see things that change that. And honestly, I think this project would have a huge benefit in that regard because it moves the street wall closer into, that'll be a Wedge Life clip, it'll move the street wall closer to the public right of way. It does a lot of other enhancements for walkability. I'm thankful for Commissioner Kronzer being so aware and focused on that, and the city staff. This project, I submitted a lot of nits to pick in there, but overall picture, this is a slam dunk. It's something I've been waiting on a long time in my neighborhood. That parking lot that is there today has a lot of drainage and water issues. It's flooded half the time, it seems. There's standing water in the part of the parking lot. This is going to be something I'm excited to see, and I'm eager to see some more changes like this happen, specifically related to the point about bikes and pedestrians before. One thing that we've discussed is having a mid-block median with a crosswalk. I'm looking to secure funding, hopefully within a couple of weeks, for a signal if that crosswalk is built. That looks like that's a completely separate thing to this, but it would lead right to the front door there. As somebody who lives to the west, I'm excited to see safer crossing there. Also, at the same time, the park board has planned, as part of their Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park Plan of 2015, a new trail on the east side of Longfellow Avenue. There's an opportunity for a crossing there as well. So happy to talk more in the future, but in the interest of a short meeting, I just want to offer my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this? I thought there was a few more. Come right on up. Don't be shy.
I'm Chris Meyer, 601 6th Street Southeast, and I'm the Park Commissioner for District 1. And I came to speak in favor of this project. First, as a park commissioner, the park board emphatically welcomes more people living close to our parks. Minneapolis just lost our #1 ranking for parks in the United States from the Trust for Public Land. We're now 3rd, and one of the biggest reasons that happened is because so much of the growth in Minneapolis has been in industrial areas that are far away from our parks. So one of the ways that we can get that #1 score back is if we enable more people to live close to them. And you could hardly find a better place. This site is close to some of our biggest and best parks, and I hope that you will welcome more people to live close by. The park board unanimously passed an amendment that I proposed when we wrote our letter on the 2040 plan, making it clear that the park board supports high density in areas where it's appropriate along transit corridors, and this is one of those where the D line will have a stop close by once it's created. I also want to note that the project is projected to produce $212,000 in park dedication fees, which will help bring us lots of improvements in the area, and it will also generate millions of dollars in property tax revenue, which will help us sustain those improvements. Also, just speaking as an individual, I wanted to come speak in favor of this because this is the type of place where I would love to live immediately above a grocery store, because then, during the winter, you can go right downstairs in your shorts. The grocery store is your pantry, and that would reduce food waste. You can get groceries immediately. It's the type of place that I think would be a great location, for example, for seniors to live. They wouldn't have to worry about things like shoveling snow. They would have groceries immediately there, shops nearby, and they could walk around on the parkway. It would also be great for young professionals who could get to work on the D-line once that's built. I did want to push the developer to go further on that, and hopefully the commission would approve it, because if you build more parking, then you're going to get more cars. You'll get more congestion on the road. If you build less, then you'll get more transit users. And in addition to seeing more grocery store customers, I'd like to see more D-line customers, because that will help make the D-line more successful. And I would also push to add as many people as you can, because that is what will help make the grocery store more sustainable. People who are car-free in particular are more likely to shop there instead of driving out to Sam's Club or wherever else. So for all those reasons, I hope you will support this project and enable as many people as possible to live at this ideal site. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jerry Mullen, and I live at 4620 Longfellow Avenue. So I'm a 20-year resident of the Longfellow Avenue, and I live 5 houses up from the proposed redevelopment. After speaking with a lot of my neighbors along our block, we're excited for the possibilities of what this site can be. That said, we have reservations about the current proposal, and we don't think the City Planning Commission should approve the current version of these plans. The Commission should take some more time with the neighbors and the developers to create a proposal that better reflects this this desirable neighborhood location. The location of this property is very unique. It isn't just an average South Minneapolis corner. At the same time, it's not uptown and it's not Dinkytown. The intersection of Cedar and Minnehaha has a small commercial node along Minnehaha Parkway, steps from Lake Nokomis and Hiawatha. It's adjacent to a public golf course, and it's a diverse residential neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood that we're talking about. The shape of this new housing development, we need to shape it into something that fits in and reflects these natural amenities. And so the neighborhood wants the development to be in character with the surroundings. And this location, I think it has a Corridor 4 designation in the very recently adopted 2040 plan. And that Corridor 4 designation means that the redevelopment should reflect a variety of building types on both small and moderate sized lots with building heights of 1 to 4 stories. So the redevelopment should follow the 2040 plan, a set of ideas which the city spent a lot of time creating and which was just tentatively approved, I think. The maximum height of this development should be 3 or 4 stories. If the developer says the cost is driving the addition of a 5th story, then we need to explore other ways to help the developer make the project work. Lunds and Barley's is a strong, dependable tenant for the first floor, so the developer shouldn't take that big of a hit. It's a stable client, and we're really excited for the grocery store to be there as well. And I am saying this for our whole block and beyond. You'll hear a few other people. The white facade doesn't fit in. It looks kind of like the other 4 to 5 Trammell Crow developments around the Twin Cities, which are located along large-scale corridors like the 394 corridor and North Loop. It doesn't fit in with the unique park-like setting of our neighborhood. It should be brick or similar, and the upper story should be tapered back so the structure doesn't look so massive. And if you look around the neighborhood for design cues such as the stone of the Holy Cross Church to the west, the bungalow style of many of the homes, the golf course clubhouse, the brick maintenance facility of the park board that's just across the street, they all blend in so you can't see them. This is going to be a white structure well above the tree line. There's no affordable housing component to this development. Besides the grocery store, how are the neighborhood residents benefiting from this? Again, redesign the building to be more in scale with the neighborhood. And it sounds like they've kind of tapered back the murals, which doesn't seem to fit with this portion. I mean, I love the murals along Nicollet Avenue between Lake and 46. They look great in a busy commercial scape, but not this residential neighborhood next to Parkland. So finally, the last issue, as always, as you've heard throughout today, is the parking and the traffic. And the residential driveway developments along Longfellow Avenue and the traffic study indicates that cars will use 47th Street to access Cedar. That's the street just north of the development, and that couldn't be further from the truth. They won't use that. You can't. I live 5 houses up from that. You can't get on and off Cedar Avenue at 47th Street because it's too busy. If you see cars are lined up from downtown to Apple Valley 14 hours a day. So that isn't realistic. This development is going to add to traffic on Longfellow Avenue, which is our street, which is a cutoff from 46 down to the Parkway. And the city needs to address that before we go ahead with these plans, or it should be part of the conditional use permit to mitigate the traffic problems in the cut-through on Longfellow Avenue. I'm all for transit and all that, but the transit corridors here are Minnehaha Parkway. They don't allow public transportation on that, and Cedar Avenue. And that section of Cedar doesn't allow public transportation because of the congestion. So I don't think that that's realistic. I mean, I would like it if there was, light rail or whatever, but that's not what is there, and it's not what's possible. The reason we put speed bumps on Longfellow Avenue 20 years ago is because the city did a large traffic study in our area, and found that it's a huge problem, so they put speed bumps on our street. You're adding to the congestion, the surface parking, which is going to narrow the streets, plus everyone that lives to the north of the golf course and those neighborhoods uses Longfellow Avenue to get to the Parkway and to the lake. So everything funnels down through Longfellow, so it's highly traffic pedestrian area. And this development is going to cause problems for that. We're not against the development, we're against the size of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, my name is Sarah O'Connor, and I live at 4628 Longfellow, just 3 houses down from where this is going to go. Again, I like the grocery store. I like the development. This is so out of scale. It's going to change the whole character of our neighborhood. 130 units. People were so distressed about the 19 units and how much that was going to change. This is 130 units. And the recommendation is for 2.5 stories. That's what we have right now. This doubles that. I was flabbergasted when I heard that this was even being proposed. I live in Minneapolis. I walk. I like to be able to go to a grocery store. I don't want 130 new neighbors. And the parking that they're proposing, Lunds and Byerly's, is fabulous. People are going to go there. They're not going to be able to park on Cedar. They're not going to be able to park on the Parkway. They're going to park in front of my house all the time. 130 units, a grocery store where the development is going to take away lots and lots of existing parking, and then they're going to share the stuff with Carboni's and Corkdork. It already gets full. It already is stressed out. And people bike, people walk, people are going to drive to Lunds and Byerly's. And they need to have a place to go. And this doesn't address that. I love my house. I love my neighborhood. I'm afraid of something going so far out of the guidelines. 130 units in a new grocery store. It's going to take away from my quality of life. And I want the same quality of life that a lot of people here do, but this is just too big. A big, giant building in the middle of a residential area. It is completely out of character. Please, please don't ruin my neighborhood.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on this item. Oh, I'm sorry, where? Oh, you can, real quick, I'll reopen it.
Very brief, because I don't actually have a whole lot to add to what some folks have already
As
said
long as you get
already.
your name and address, I'm happy.
Adam Miller, 4931 18th Avenue South. So we're just on the south side of the creek from this. And we moved there because there's a grocery store. So we're really excited to see their grocery store get an upgrade, have a new and better grocery store, and we're looking forward to having more neighbors. Traffic is always a thing. The way you reduce traffic is you let people live above a grocery store where they don't have to drive for everything they need to do. It's already a grocery store. It already gets traffic. It's not going to make much difference there. We'll probably be able to see it from our house. We're slightly uphill, so we'll probably will see it from our backyard. Oh well, it's a building. We live in a city. We need nice things in the city, and this looks really good. So I just want to speak in support.
Thank you. All right, now I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, would you like to have discussion on this item? Commissioner Schrader.
Sure, I'd like to hear a little bit more about kind of the traffic plan. I know that there's been a concern, and that's just a busy section to be able to cross Cedar, and I know you've done a little bit of work on it.
Good evening. I'm Trish C. with Kimley Horn, one of the civil engineers on the project. So I think Gretchen's going to pull up a site plan. A couple of things that I just want to highlight from the general area and from the traffic studies. Obviously, Cedar is a very busy road. There is an existing grocery store there, so the addition of the trips looking at grocery store to grocery store are 27 additional trips in the AM peak hour and 38 in the PM. So keep in mind, Cedar obviously is a busy road. There's about 18,000 trips per day. So that's, negligible amount when you look in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to try to hit on a couple comments I heard too. So one of the level of service delay. So all of the intersections that were analyzed as part of this project remain their existing level of service. Except for Minnehaha Parkway and Cedar, which increases from a C to D in the peak hour, and that's for an increase of 1.4 seconds. So yes, it does kick it to the next level, but it still is relatively minor.
On that, if you don't mind if I can interrupt you, on that point, like what are you looking at to not have that? Because I mean, that's not if you live there, that's not a great answer. And I understand those aren't conditions that, didn't start it. You inherited a C. But what kind of things are you looking at to make that a little bit safer?
So conversations with the city, and what I've been told is that the signal at Minnehaha and Cedar is under review for improvements anyways. So that in the near future that signal is going to be improved since it's known to have congestion right now. So that will be included in the future improvements. So it has been talked about.
Okay, I'd also just like to encourage you, I've heard it from numerous people that have talked, that work with the city, work with the county, to see what you can do to make that better.
Okay, yep, we will certainly do that. And then the last thing I'll say too is that the residential traffic, because of how the parking on the second level is situated, is going to exit onto Longfellow. And just by people trying to take the path of least resistance, most people, whether they're heading to 62 or not, are going to take a right out and go to Minnehaha Parkway to get to the signalized intersection, as opposed to the non-signalized intersection at 47th and Cedar.
Okay. Excuse me, ma'am, we have to. All right, Commissioner Coleman, you have a question?
Oh no, I am finished, thank you.
So my question is around the bike ped circulation and access. What in the traffic study, if anything, was considered in regards to getting people safely across the streets, bike circulation within the site? And maybe that's not you to answer that.
Sure, I could touch on it, and from two different standpoints. One, within the travel demand management plan, multimodal trips are looked at. So it's looked at, what we think, how many people are going to come via bike or transit or everything else, to look at parking and requirements and what else is needed. So internally, it evaluates how many spots are needed for bike parking and such on site. From more of a site standpoint, we are bounded, especially on the Cedar side, in the middle of a block. We're not at the intersection of Minnehaha and Cedar, or 47th and Cedar. So what we've done is try to maintain as wide of sidewalks as we possibly can, where it's directly adjacent to the site. Our hands are a little bit tied in that, we don't have purview over what's done across the street or in Cedar Avenue. However, I respect what Matt had to say about what he's been trying to do from a neighborhood perspective of trying to work with the county and trying to get a crosswalk put in mid-block on Cedar. So we've tried to do the best we can of everything that we can control on our site and directly adjacent to it.
Do you mind if I add one comment to that?
Absolutely.
All right, so we've been corresponding with Matt and some of the neighbors on just designing our project with fluidity, because we know that certain things happen sooner than some of the capital improvements and some of the plans that are going to be happening. So we've overlaid some of their initial drawings for crosswalks with flashers and et cetera. So the north side of our east-west road, we are designed so in the event that the county or the city decides to bump out those areas, it doesn't infringe upon our entrance to the building and view corridors. We've also run numerous turning radiuses if there's ever going to be in the middle of a lane, a landscape buffer or turn lane median. So it works to allow for that future flexibility, and we're all for crosswalk improvements. This is a rental building. This is not an ownership. We don't build this, fill it, and walk away. We are going to be renewing leases and making sure people are safe and friendly. And then furthermore, Lunds, just like us, they're very cognizant of safety. People need to go there, shop. They're stewards of the community, and we're going to work with them and the neighbors as plans evolve. We're just a little bit ahead of some of the plans that Matt and team have recommended, but we're all for it, and we agree. Safety's key.
Great, I appreciate that. And like Councilmember Schrader suggested, keep working with the city. Yep. I have a question on stormwater. So the stormwater control, I appreciate the fact that you're managing stormwater from off your site, it sounds like, which is great. It's an improvement overall. As one of the commenters suggested, did you consider anything other than just the mechanical stormwater management, such as green roofs or other amenities or other stormwater features that can provide amenities?
That's a great comment. So given the groundwater is about 3 feet below the foundations. We're really driven to one means and methods to hold and then slowly release the stormwater. So that's layman's terms, a jellyfish system that basically collects water from the roof down the gutter into the system, also collects rainwater from on site, and then slowly releases it. In addition, we're improving the neighbors' parking lot, so we're having to bring their standards above and beyond what currently is grandfathered in. So the existing conditions is basically almost 100% of surface parking lot with buildings that were grandfathered in under the previous code and previous watershed requirements. So we're going to upgrade theirs and ours to collect and release to the 2-inch that was mentioned. So I think we're limited with site area by going down and bigger vaults and doing certain things. There's really a system that has to float above the water table, collect and release. But I think as stringent as all of them, we're well above, just given that we're collecting, cleaning, and releasing at a slower rate into the system. And right now the conditions are not ideal. I don't know if there's any other items that you want to add, but that's what I have.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Traffic question?
Just a second, Commissioner Cruncher, ask a question first.
Another question for the applicant. Can you talk about your precondition surveys and your plan for monitoring any vibration on site?
Yes, as part of our process, we will administer precondition surveys. Videos, photos will be governed by the city code and abide by those in working hours. So that is part of our process.
What type of activities do you see as high vibration here?
I would say, given we're not going down, we're not digging a basement 12 feet and pouring foundations and doing those sorts of things, I would say that it's going to be front-loaded. I can't answer fully because we haven't fully designed the foundation system, but we'll make sure to adhere to the neighbors on that.
Okay, thank you.
And since the public hearing is closed, I can't take your testimony, but I would say if you have further questions, you can ask the applicant outside of the chambers, if that's, or even staff.
I'm just saying that they neglected to talk about the resident traffic coming in. Can they address that?
Yes, they can.
I can answer it. We've tried to bifurcate the retail and residential entrances, so when you live there, you know where to drive in the evening hours, you know the traffic patterns. These are not people not knowing where to go. So we've added the intersection on Longfellow for all the residents to enter, and then we wanted to have dual points. So we have 3 points for the retailer patrons, and we've furthermore, a lot of the questions regarding loading, we've actually enclosed those from view corridors. We've put them on the south side of the site, and we've made sure all the turning radiuses happen within our site, so there's no 3-point turns, there's no backing in. You pull in and you leave, and you have an easy exit. And working with Lunds, they study this. They've sent this to their delivery trucks. These are early evening drop-offs and pickups for deliveries. So we don't view, rush hour peak periods when they're having deliveries. These are going to be off-peak hours.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman.
Just one more. I just recalled one of the comments in regards to materials, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you do have a brick face facade. Maybe it's not the color red, but it is brick, isn't it?
It is brick, and well, yeah, you want to hold it up, Neil? We're calling it white. It's the color of the clay, though. It's an integral color, so it's not like a white. So you can kind of see it here. But yes, this whole, the building, or I'm calling it a building, the piece on screen here is all brick. And we're using it at the key areas where you would feel it as a pedestrian, and so at the lower areas on the other facade, but on this facade it's brick all the way to the top.
Just to piggyback off that real quick, what's the mortar line color and profile?
It will likely be like a light gray. We haven't decided yet. We found that does work well with this color.
And would you find that the profile would be more like flush with it to minimize shadowing, or would you have it recessed like a standard, or what's your?
It would probably be a standard joint, the kind of the concave joint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if anyone would like to make a motion on one of the 4 applications before us? On 4 items. Commissioner Brown.
I'll start things off. I'll move approval of items A and B, the two conditional use permits, and both of those have one stated condition.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion on those items?
I can just quickly add, I think the findings were articulated well in the staff report. I think overall, some height at this location is very consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think this particular commercial district is not very urban in its character right now and is kind of auto-oriented with a lot of different curb cuts. Not a great pedestrian environment, and I think adding some density at this location will help with that. The site plan also helps mitigate some of the present rather unsightly asphalt parking lots as well.
Any other comments? All right then. Clerk, can you please call roll on the conditional use permit A and B? Motion to approve them.
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
Those conditions pass. Commissioner Brown.
And I will move approval of item C, the variance for floor area ratio.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the variance?
And on this one, I will add, I do think this is a unique circumstance with the location and the floodplain and the need for changing the elevation here. It's not possible to do underground parking, which would allow for a higher FAR at this location. So I think there are some unique conditions present at this site.
And I'll echo, I found that condition to be rather compelling and unique to the site as well. Any other comments? All right, clerk, would you please call roll on the motion to approve the variance C?
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That passes. Commissioner Brown.
And I will move approval of item D, the site plan review.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on approving site plan? Commissioner Kronzer.
I'd like to propose a few modifications to the conditions. To condition 6, in response to some of what the applicant is asking for, adding to the back of that, and shall work with staff to introduce a limited amount of metal siding on the east elevation. So responding to that request for the metal siding on the east side, the work with staff condition. Replacing condition 7 with a new modified condition. The wood-like screen shall be installed per the elevations presented at this hearing tonight, with the addition of it being extended along the entire south elevation. I can speak to that in a second. And then a new condition 12. Where'd it go here? Here we go. The window shall be installed where the art mural was, as presented tonight, adjacent to the main entry. I just want to capture that as a condition. Yeah, thank you, Gretchen. That's a really important change, which I was happy to see tonight. Providing that visibility where that outdoor seating is will really activate that street front and the pedestrian environment.
All right, and is there a second on the amended site plan review conditions?
Second.
All right, so any discussion on?
Yeah, just on the south elevation, I think it's hard to really visualize, maybe architects have. That south elevation will be extremely visible from a lot of different angles. So having that metal-like screen extend is going to be very important. So that's in that meaning of that condition.
All right, seeing no other comments, I'll ask clerk to call roll on the site plan review with the revised conditions 6, 7, and an additional 12.
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That passes. Next up, we will hear it from 311 2nd Avenue Southeast.
Okay, Commissioners, the next project that we have is at 311 2nd Street Southeast. This is located in the Marcy Holmes neighborhood. It is the site of the former General Mills Riverside Technical Facility. The project, it should also be noted, is located in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District and received a certificate of appropriateness from the Heritage Preservation Commission for the current proposal that is before you. We have discussed this project previously at the Committee of the Whole, although I believe there are some new commissioners since that took place. So I'll give a brief overview of the project. It's a large, complicated project, so I won't get too far into detail, but I'm happy to answer specific questions, and also the applicant is here to answer questions specifically about the design. The site is currently zoned for the I-1 industrial district with the industrial living overlay. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the existing parcel into 2 new zoning lots and an outlot in order to facilitate the development of a new 568 planned unit development with 2 principal residential structures and approximately 4,300 square feet of commercial space. You'll recall that the Expo, a project that was approved by this commission a couple of years ago, is currently under construction immediately to the west of this site. This is an aerial overview that shows the Expo in the background and then the proposed development in the foreground. You can see that the 2 principal residential structures are basically equivalent to 2 typical Minneapolis city blocks. And then there is proposed reconnection of the 4th Avenue Southeast right-of-way through the site, which will be owned and maintained and operated as a private street with public access. Another aerial view of the site showing the Expo to the right-hand side of the screen. This is looking towards the St. Anthony Falls Historic District and downtown Minneapolis. And then the existing conditions of the site today as the General Mills Riverside Technical Facility, the proposed plat, and the proposed site plan. The planned unit development application has some specific requirements related to exceptions to the zoning code. In this particular case, the applicant is asking for an exception to exceed the maximum building height in the I-1 industrial district, which is 4 stories, 56 feet. The proposed amenities, as required by the PUD ordinance, are active liner uses in the proposed parking garage. So both sites contain a enclosed parking garage at the center of the development and are lined on all 4 sides facing the public street and the private street with residence units, walk-up residence units, and residential amenity space. And then the applicant is requesting, and we're recommending that they are granted 5 points for reestablishing the 4th Avenue Southeast right-of-way as a desired connection that is articulated in the small area plan and that supports larger comprehensive plan goals. So again, I won't get too far into the details. The applicant is here. I'm happy to try to answer any questions, or we can let them get a little bit further into the project.
Thank you, Peter. I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Schrader.
Thanks, Mr. Graham. Just one quick on the 5 points for connecting the road. I know that wasn't the full amount of points available. Can you get a little, just don't have to get in a whole lot of detail, but why not the full amount?
Sure. So the way that amenity is written in the PUD ordinance is that in order to get the full 10 points, you have to publicly dedicate it as a right-of-way. and have it essentially be operated as a public street by the city of Minneapolis. In this case, the applicant is interested in maintaining it as a private street, such that it relates to some of the adjacent residential uses, and also to provide a higher level of amenity and design than would typically be allowed on a Minneapolis public right-of-way. Public Works has very specific design standards and would not generally support the level of amenity that the applicant is proposing. So staff has recommended that the street be publicly accessible, but that it be maintained by the applicant essentially.
Well, thanks. And then also just for context, how much does this road with the added amenities, that's a good thing, but how much does it fit in with other roads? Will other roads look like this, or how much is it going to stay? I'll ask the applicant, never mind.
Yeah, there's a proposed median in the center of the road, which is not necessarily typical of a traditional Minneapolis street, but that's the principal difference. And then there's a high degree of landscaping amenity proposed.
Great, thanks.
To follow up on that, and maybe the applicant asks us as he gets going, has Public Works signed off on the lack of apron? Because Fifth Avenue is also a public street. That has a typical concrete apron. This is a typical roadway corner, one, and I don't know if you know the answer to that. Two, how is the public access being memorialized? Is there an easement, goodwill, some testimony at a hearing?
I'll let the applicant address that.
Would the applicant care to speak?
Here I am. Vice President Luke Pierre and members of the commission. Let's start with those questions. I'm Kelly Dorn. My office address is 7803 Glenway Road, Bloomington, Minnesota. We'll start with that question. The other thing we're doing under that 4th Avenue is water treatment and storage is also going to go under there, which is extensive. And so that's very similar to what we did on 5th between the two buildings at Mill and Main. That's also a private street that also has water storage under it. We maintain that street. That's actually 3 different property owners that maintain that street. We maintain the southern half, the soapbox factory building owners maintain half of the other half, and the Dominion people that own the Warehouse 3 building there maintain that. So that's written in an agreement. It's a recorded easement. This would also be a recorded easement that would provide for public access. We're specifically precluded from putting up any, I think we have the right to put up a sign that says it's a private drive, but it's not a private road. I mean, it's open to the public. Anybody can use it. It's available. And the real reason that Public Works doesn't want to have it be a public street is they don't really want to pay for it. And so we wanted to pay for the extra improvements to make it something special. There's lots of streets in Minneapolis actually that have medians in it. Lindale Avenue has medians in it almost its whole length from certain points to that. So there are streets that have medians in it. And I think that this is really a delightful way to do that, both short and long term. So that hopefully answered those questions. Okay. I think Peter did an excellent job. We have a full set of information. We have elevations if you want to see them. We have renderings if you want to see them. We are generally in support of the staff's staff report and the conditions that they provided for under Section A for the conditional use permit, the 3 conditions, as well as the 5 conditions that they have under the site plan review. And as well as their recommendation for approval for the preliminary and final plat. We're platting this into 3 lots mainly to make certain that 4th is on a separate lot from the rest of the buildings, and that's mainly done for liability purposes more than anything. And we've gone through this. We've been on this trip for over a year. We started out with meetings back in May of 2018. We've been in front of the both Historic Preservation Commission a couple of times on a committee of the whole, as well as you folks a couple of times. If you recall, those that were participated, we had 5 options that were originally presented for various ways to do this project. We thought we were all on the same page in terms of what the direction was going to go, and then which included one tower on the east end of the project. And when we got to the Historic Preservation Commission, they decided that that was indeed not their preference. And we did that on an informal basis at a meeting in March, and they asked us to reconsider and eliminate that tower. And so we agreed to do that, and we came back to them in I guess it was March. We went to them in January. We came back to them in March and received approval of the project for a certificate of appropriateness. So that's the history of that, and I guess I'll leave it at that. We're here to answer any questions, and I would reserve my right to comment on any other comments if it comes up as we go, but other than that, I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Commissioner Schrader.
Sure, just wanted to follow up on the streets because I think my worry, I'm really happy to hear you're adding more amenities, but the fear is that it looks so nice no one's going to feel like they can go down it and that it is going to feel like a private drive. So that my concerns there, and just kind of wanted you to address that. And then also, while the boulevard's nice, and I'm really happy to hear about water retention, another way to make that more pedestrian friendly is just to make wider sidewalks, just not have the boulevard and make it more accessible on the side and kind of put that.
The sidewalks are already 8 feet around the entire site. We believe in wider sidewalks, and that's consistent with what we've done there as well. We're also doing bump outs at all of the intersections so that we provide that additional safety zone for pedestrians looking to cross the street. We think the median down the middle just does add a little bit to it. I recognize that. I'm hopeful that people are not intimidated by it because we want them to come to our building. We want to do it. I will tell you from our experience in building the expo next door, we've had a hard time keeping people from driving through the construction site. So they don't seem intimidated by too much in the neighborhood, and they're willing to persevere through that. So I don't think a finished fourth will ultimately be that big of a problem.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none. All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to continue the public hearing. If people want to come up and give your name and address to the record, anyone who'd like to testify on this item, come right up. It throws everyone off.
Thank you. My name is Sue DiNuccio, and I live at 222 2nd Street Southeast, approximately 100 yards from the expo and maybe 175 yards from the new construction. The reason I'm here is Kelly and his team have responded to a number of our concerns, and I'd like to acknowledge that they have been working with us. Since planning is in the official name of your commission, I would like to emphasize that we would like to know how the contractors and the expansion of 574 units are going to be accommodated on a time frame of 2021 when just year to date this year at the expo we have had 17 weeks of after hours permits and weekend work. They didn't work Easter. That was pleasant. We have not been notified at all, which I think is a requirement. Any resident is supposed to be notified of after-hours work. I understand that concrete mixers and heavy trucks coming into the city has to be accommodated with commuting traffic. However, the trucks are typically lined up at about 6 a.m. They work all day. There's a lot of concrete going into the expo. And then in 2021, the Central Avenue Bridge is going to be closed. So to meet the requirements that are laid forth in this site plan, there are 2 phases. One has to be completed by 2021, the other by 2023. I would like to know as a resident, what does the contractor plan on do? Are they going to be working every single weekend? Are we going to be notified? Will they be working until 9 p.m.? Will they be starting at 6 a.m.? Because that's been the present practice since January, 17 consecutive weeks of after-hours work. As another exception, 2nd Street Southeast is a small street. It is considered a corridor, However, because a number of, we have 2 events centers. We have right-hand turning traffic off the bridge headed to 35W Bridge to get on to the commuters. And so when the official commuting hours are over, the cement trucks back into the construction site at the expo, so they are blocking the street entirely. There is a construction worker putting out a sign that says stop or slow, but there is no room to turn around. So if you are a queued up car or school bus or private vehicle, there's no place to turn, so traffic is queuing. So just to summarize, I think it's reasonable to inspect what you expect, and I've had conversations with Patrick Howland in the environmental department, who has said to us that he was surprised at the number of after-hours permits. He's going to look into it more deeply, but he also remarked he has 400 sites and 8 inspectors. He's asking us as residents to turn in reports, call 311, take video. We can do that, but I think on the front end, it would be reasonable to see what Kelly and CSM, how they're going to deliver on the requirement of the 2021 phase and the 2023 phase that does not include a takeover of the neighborhood. We also have 2 event centers. We have the A Mill. We have a nice array of restaurants. We support the development, but we don't support nonstop, almost 14 hours of construction, lights, and extreme heavy equipment. I think that's it. Do you have any questions of me?
I don't see any, although we were going to comment to do the things you already are doing. And yes, they are required to notify neighbors. So
We've never gotten one notification.
Okay, so
at all.
I would say none of those are anything I can directly tie to the 3 applications we're reviewing today, but I would say after this hearing to have a discussion out in the hallway about what the strategy would be, especially for notification and making sure that it will be in compliance. And I think documenting it will be key then for any future inspection purposes. So that doesn't quite solve your problem, but hopefully it helps lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is relative to the specific plan is because you are requiring them to be done by 2021 and 2023, I think it's reasonable to ask the planning team, are they planning on delivering that with 7-day work weeks?
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Cordelia Pearson. I live at 512 7th Street Southeast in this neighborhood, and I'm here as the Regional Commissioner for the Mississippi River Parkway Commission. The mission of the commission, and I asked staff to share the brochure and map, and for those of you who don't already have it, a National Park Service guide for the river. The mission is to preserve, promote, and enhance the Mississippi River throughout the state of Minnesota. And we are fortunate to have the Falls scenic, historic, and cultural resources right here in this neighborhood and in this that are affected by this project. This is an historic moment. We are transitioning from the last flower-related, food-related production in Minneapolis, the Riverside Technical Plant, General Mills plant, to preparing for the 21st century of our riverfront. We're really excited to see this development coming forward and how it has evolved in the last year. But as we transition from ending this 130-year era of food production on the riverfront to how we want our 21st century riverfront to grow, we are looking at a change from food production to addressing climate change and our food sustainability in the state. So I'll address that specifically. This site in particular affected how we built our city, but also how we shaped our region's economy, and it changed how we eat. Milling changed how we eat. So looking forward in climate change and sustainable growth, it is fabulous that this site is being developed with density and that it earned the Heritage Preservation Commission's approval with a certificate of appropriateness. The developer has been wonderful about listening and adjusting his project accordingly. It's fabulous that this project supports walkability. It's on a transit line. We're hoping that there'll be more transit on that line. We are eager to see better pedestrian crossings because of we hope, heavier pedestrian use at this site, and those are all related to climate change because we need to get people out of their cars and walking and biking and using transit. So those are two things that are fabulous. And this last area is an area that I think, as you review all of your projects, thinking about the city having passed a pollinator-friendly policy several years ago, the pollinator requirements, planting pollinator-friendly plants in public right-of-way have been in place for years. This 4th Avenue connection is fabulous, and what I ask the Commission to do, as you look at approving the planned unit development, the PUD, you could encourage or require the types of plantings to foster this sustainability for the 21st century. So specifically, as I mentioned in the letter that I sent, all the landscaping going in on this site is new. So the developer will have to purchase plants. Why not purchase plants that are native friendly and pollinator friendly? They're cheaper to maintain, they have less water input and chemical inputs. With the proximity of this site to the Mississippi River and being within the Mississippi River critical area, the ecological benefits have been proven that even within a quarter mile of this river corridor and with patches of habitat that are within a quarter mile of each other, that is critical to sustaining native bee populations that are vital for our food systems. Small scale makes a difference. The clean water benefits are indeed great. This site is 85% impervious. Of the 15% that is landscaped and could be pervious, let's make sure that with your development review authority, you can require native pollinator-friendly plants. So as the city is transitioning from food production to looking at our food systems and sustainability and climate change, I ask you to honor the past and then plant native seeds for a sustainable future. Instead of going back and having the legislature provide grant funds to have non-native and turf converted to bee-friendly landscaping, as the legislature just did, where you have the opportunity for a completely new landscaping plan, be visionary and think about the next generation. So thank you for your support of sustainable growth in Minneapolis, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And once again, support the project and would like to see native plantings be added.
Commissioner Coleman has a question.
Cordelia, I have that question. So I imagine you've looked at the landscaping plan?
Yes.
And what specific changes would you suggest?
So while I'm not a landscape architect to look at the specific dimensions and the locations of plants, the species list, there are a few that are native and there are many that are not. There is turf and there are landscaping aspects that are not native. It could be a condition of the approval of the PUD that you require maybe the MWMO, the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, to provide technical assistance to the developer on that or to provide a list. The city and the park board both have lists that we have used in other landscaping that's native in the neighborhood. So without being prescriptive about a species list, to say being prescriptive about the pollinator-friendly and native plants. Is that helpful? Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, does anyone else, would anyone else like to speak on this item? Come on up.
Chris Meyer, 6016 6th Street Southeast, Park Board Commissioner for District 1. I welcome having more neighbors. I live a couple blocks away from this site, but I wanted to express disappointment with a few aspects of the project. One, I spoke with the developer just beforehand. about what Cordelia was talking about getting native plants in the public spaces. And, he said that he refuses, the city can't require him to do that. I appreciated the frankness of the developer on that, but if there's any way that you can put that in the PUD, I think it would help a lot. The park board has been putting in a lot of pollinator friendly areas across the region, and we need more connections between them to help make that a full system. If there's not any way that you can put it in the PUD, hopefully we can think long term about how we can push developers to be putting these native plants wherever they can. Right now, the developer has kind of a poor track record on this. At the Mill and Main site, the area there is, just Kentucky bluegrass, like sterile, look suburban, could be a lot more nature friendly. So I'd encourage you to push on that. Also wanted to express disappointment about what I consider a pretty excessive amount of parking that's being proposed here. In the staff report, they listed what they anticipated to be the peak amount of parking that was required, and this project builds more than that, which I feel is not looking toward the future of what this site could be. In general, more people are using car sharing to get around, which means that they don't need to necessarily own their vehicles anymore. And the Metro Council staff just recommended adding the E-line, extending it through this neighborhood. And so I would, like to see more push towards transit usage there. And if they're building an excessive amount of parking there, then we're going to be moving in the opposite direction. So I just wanted to share those two, and hope in your PUD that you can maybe push for some changes to that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Erik Wunderlich. I live at 413 5th Street Southeast, and I'm here to talk, to reiterate the letter that you have representing the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association. So I'm just going to quickly go through these points. This project generally follows the guidance of established plans, including the 2014 Marcy Homes Master Plan, as summarized in the General Mills site redevelopment recommendations that are with the letter. From January 2016, most notably in these ways: reuse of a defunct industrial site for high-density housing that unfortunately included no affordable component, public right-of-way dedication for a reopened 4th Avenue Southeast, long sought by the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association to be built in Phase 1. And we had the same questions about why it didn't merit 10 points, so I appreciate the explanation. Pedestrian improvements, including bump outs at block corners, active ground floor uses, eyes on the street, and pleasantly landscaped connections to the riverfront. It continues the transformation of 2nd Street Southeast from industrial to residential use. Brings more life to University Avenue Southeast, though retail might better be concentrated near the East Hennepin business node. Interesting architectural massing with varied heights, setbacks, and restrained material choices. In summary, Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association recommends the Planning Commission adopt staff recommendations in the report with these considerations. Add to the site plan review condition number 2 that no signs that discourage public passage through private 4th Avenue Southeast be allowed. That the applicant continue working with Metro Transit to accommodate bus rapid transit on University Avenue, and with Public Works to accommodate the protected bicycle track. And that the applicant consult the St. Anthony Heritage Board and the Neighborhood's Creative Places Committee regarding public art and historical interpretation along 2nd Street Southeast. Any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this item?
Do you want to close, or you want me to comment?
I was going to close it.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Commissioners, we have 3 items before us. Would anybody like to kick off discussion on any one of them? Commissioner Brown.
I'll move approval of item A, the conditional use permit. with the three stated conditions. That's conditional use permit for a PUD.
There is a motion to approve the conditional use permit. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Oh, Commissioner Coleman.
Sure. Well, I am not inclined to add a condition to the conditional or planned unit development conditional use permit on habitat for native bees. I do think there's a misperception that native plants are higher maintenance. I think that native plants can be just as beautiful and easy to maintain as non-native plants. And I know there's some issues with dogs being curbed on turf grass, and that is eliminated with native plantings. It is if it's taller than the dog's legs. So.
Commissioner Schrader.
I just want to echo those points. That's definitely a way the city is going. We're having to, I wouldn't say just take water management more seriously, but it's just a real cost the city is having to do, and it is something that I just encourage developers to be forward thinking about.
All right, seeing no further comment, clerk, would you please call roll on item A, which is the conditional use permit?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Franzer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion passes. Commissioner Brown.
Approval of item B. Move approval of item B, the site plan review with the 5 stated conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Commissioner Franzer.
Just say really quickly that this project does a great job along the urban edge, the active uses along the street, the landscaping, the bump outs. It's a really well designed urban project, and I thank you for that.
Commissioner Coleman.
And I would just echo that. I think it's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood, and I give the developer a lot of credit for managing public comments and HPC comments along the way.
Commissioner Brown.
And I'll just add, I certainly appreciate the protected bike facility along, well, with the expo, these 3 blocks of University Avenue. I think that's a great addition to a location that has a lot of bike traffic, but not the most hospitable environment. And I think that can be something that is continued when University Avenue is eventually reconstructed.
Sorry to interrupt, but I do need to comment on that. That actually is not being allowed by Public Works.
Okay.
So just so you understand that, I don't want you to have a misconception. We tried to get that approved by Public Works. We offered to pay for it, including on the Expo block, but Public Works has indicated they have other plans for bike travel along University Avenue, and they've declined that opportunity. So I just want you to not have a misconception. Okay?
I don't know, maybe Mr. Crandall, I don't know if you have any further insight into those discussions or any context for that. I guess that presents a bit of a concern for me, at least.
That's correct, what the developer just stated. We've been working in concert with Public Works to make sure that the project's right-of-way plan with regard to bicycle facilities is in line with the design for the corridor as a whole. And what was originally proposed was an idea that was thrown around at one point, but has ultimately been rejected by Public Works.
Okay. So
you're referring to the off-street bicycle.
I guess are there specific plans? What does Public Works propose for a bike facility there?
There is a specific plan for bike facilities on University and 4th, and I believe it includes an on-street protected bikeway, not an off-street grade separated public bikeway. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I know that what's proposed here does not correspond to their plan for the corridor.
So their main concern, if I'm understanding, is primarily the continuity.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Schrader.
I'd like to propose kind of 2 amendments to the site plan, to the motion, just on number 1, just to add on and just say, encourage the developer to explore native plantings And then on number 2, just to add on to that, there should be no signs that discourage public passage through the private 4th Avenue.
Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
There's a second. It's going to do a quick vote, voice vote on addition of those 2 additional points to conditions 1 and 2. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, those amendments are now included on the motion to approve the site plan. Are there any further discussion points on the motion before us now? All right, seeing none, I'll have clerk call roll on approval of the site plan review with the 2 amended conditions.
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that is passed. Commissioner Brown.
I'll move approval of item C, the preliminary and final plat.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Brown.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion passes. Congratulations. All right, seeing no other business, this meeting is adjourned. The next regular meeting of the Minneapolis Planning Commission is Monday, June 17th.